What if I told you that the secrets of everlasting life aren't just found in ancient fairy tales, but were once believed to be real possibilities? Picture this: faded manuscripts with intricate illustrations of figures floating among clouds, ancient texts describing beings who drank from magical springs and ascended to celestial realms. Across cultures and centuries, humanity has been utterly fascinated by the idea of escaping death's grip, of achieving a state beyond mortal limitations. These aren't just myths, they're reflections of our deepest yearnings, our timeless questions about existence, and our relentless pursuit of something more. Think about the stories your grandparents might have told you, legends of wise sages in misty Chinese mountains who discovered the elixir of life, or powerful Norse gods whose deeds echoed through the halls of Valhalla. These narratives have been passed down for thousands of years, captivating generation after generation. They speak to something primal within us, the desire to transcend, to become part of something eternal. And the most astonishing part, these tales aren't isolated to one culture or one era. From the 8 immortals of Taoist tradition to the god-kings of Mesopotamia, from the alchemists of medieval Europe to the spirit walkers of indigenous tribes, the concept of immortality appears again and again, as if humanity is collectively reaching for the same impossible star. In this video, we're going to journey through 35 of the most remarkable legends of the immortal realm. We'll explore how different civilizations envisioned eternal life, what these beings represented, and why their stories continue to resonate with us today. This isn't just a list of myths, it's an invitation to see how our ancestors dreamed of defeating death itself. You'll discover how these timeless tales connect to our modern search for meaning, and perhaps even catch a glimpse of why the idea of immortality remains one of humanity's most powerful and enduring mysteries. So settle in, open your mind, and let's explore the extraordinary world of those who are said to live forever. Our journey into the realm of the everlasting begins in ancient China with one of its most beloved and enduring groups of legends, the 8 Immortals. These figures are far more than just characters in old stories. They are archetypes representing the entire spectrum of human life and the diverse paths one might take to achieve spiritual transcendence. Unlike the aloof gods of many mythologies, the 8 Immortals are deeply relatable. They were once mortal, each overcoming their own unique struggles and flaws to attain immortality, making their stories a powerful metaphor for personal growth and the mastery of one's own destiny. First among them is Lai Taiguai, often recognized by his iron crutch and the gourd of medicine he carries. His story is one of humility and the unexpected forms wisdom can take. Originally a handsome sage, his spirit once traveled to meet Laozi, the ancient philosopher, leaving his physical body behind. Upon returning, he discovered his body had been mistakenly cremated, forcing his spirit to inhabit the only vessel available, the corpse of a lame beggar. Instead of lamenting his new, unsightly form, he embraced it, using his knowledge of herbs and medicine to become a healer of the poor and sick. His iron crutch symbolizes strength and support, reminding us that true power comes from within, not from one's appearance. Then we have Zhongli Quan, a former general who found enlightenment after failing in his military endeavors. He is depicted with a large fan that can resurrect the dead and transform stones into silver or gold. He represents the military aspect of society and the alchemical pursuit of transformation. His fan is not just a magical tool, it symbolizes the ability to create change, to stir the winds of fortune, and to bring life from death. He is often shown with his belly exposed, a sign of his carefree nature and his rejection of worldly vanity after discovering a higher truth. Perhaps the most famous of the 8 is Lu Dongbin, a scholar and poet who was tempted with visions of wealth and pleasure before achieving immortality. He carries a demon-slaying magic sword on his back, which he uses to rid the world of evil, but he also carries a fly whisk on his shoulder, symbolizing his ability to sweep away worldly desires. His journey is one of overcoming temptation and using one's intellect and moral integrity to fight for good. He is the patron of those who seek knowledge, embodying the struggle between our higher aspirations and our baser instincts. The group is beautifully balanced by the presence of its female members, like He Xianggu, who holds a lotus flower symbolizing purity and perfection. As a young woman, she dreamt of becoming immortal by consuming mother-of-pearl powder and eventually ascended to heaven, choosing to remain a virgin to preserve her spiritual integrity. She represents the feminine, the pursuit of grace, and the purity of purpose. Each of the other immortals adds another dimension to this tapestry of human experience. There's Lan Ke, a figure of ambiguous gender, representing the androgynous and carefree aspects of nature, often depicted with a basket of flowers. Zhang Guolao, an elderly man with a bamboo drum, embodies the wisdom and eccentricity of old age. Cao Guojiu from the imperial court stands for nobility and righteousness, and Han Xiangzi, a scholar and nephew of a famous poet, represents the arts and culture, often shown with a flute. Together, they form a complete picture of society, rich and poor, male and female, young and old, military and civilian, showing that enlightenment is not reserved for any single type of person, but is a potential path for all of humanity. While the 8 immortals show us a path to spiritual transcendence, another equally powerful and ancient legend has captivated seekers across the globe: the pursuit of a physical substance, a tangible key to unlock the door to everlasting life. This is the relentless quest for the elixir of life, a potion or pill so potent it could, according to legend, cure all ailments and grant immortality to whoever consumed it. This wasn't a mere fantasy, it was a serious and often deadly scientific and philosophical endeavor that consumed some of history's greatest minds. The search for this ultimate prize became the central focus of alchemy, a proto-scientific tradition that bloomed independently in cultures worlds apart, revealing a universal human desire to conquer death not just spiritually but physically. In ancient China, alchemists, often Taoist sages, dedicated their lives to creating the Huandan, the pill of immortality. Their laboratories, nestled in remote mountains believed to be brimming with spiritual energy, were filled with complex apparatus for distillation and sublimation. They experimented with a vast array of ingredients, from cinnabar, a toxic mercury sulfide prized for its vibrant red color, to gold, jade, and rare herbs. Their methods were a fusion of spiritual practice and early chemistry, where the purification of metals was seen as a mirror to the purification of the soul. The goal was to create a perfect, incorruptible substance that, when ingested, would transform the mortal body into an equally perfect and eternal form. This wasn't just about living forever, it was about achieving a state of harmony with the Tao, the fundamental force of the universe. No figure embodies the desperate hunger for this elixir more than Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. Having achieved unimaginable earthly power, his terror of death became an all-consuming obsession. He dispatched massive expeditions, some led by a court magician named Zhu Fu, across the seas to the mythical Pinglai Mountain, a paradise island where the immortals were said to dwell and where the elusive pill could be found. He consumed countless concoctions created by his court alchemists, many of which likely contained mercury and other poisons that may have contributed to his premature death. His tragic story is a stark reminder of the perilous line these early scientists walked, where the quest for eternal life often hastened its opposite. Across the continents and centuries, a strikingly parallel pursuit was underway in medieval and Renaissance Europe. Here, the ultimate objective was the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance believed to not only transmute base metals into gold, but also to produce the elixir of life, or aqua vitae. For alchemists like Paracelsus, the pursuit was deeply symbolic. The process of creating the stone through stages of negrito blackening, albedo whitening, citrinitas yellowing, and rubedo reddening was an allegory for the inner transformation of the alchemist. The base metal represented the unenlightened soul, and through purification and struggle, it could be transformed into spiritual gold, achieving a state of perfection and unity with the divine. The elixir, then, was more than a medicine. It was a symbol of divine knowledge and spiritual awakening. This quest attracted brilliant minds from Isaac Newton to John Dee, who pored over cryptic texts and conducted endless experiments, encoding their findings in mysterious symbols and allegorical drawings. They believed that unlocking the secret of immortality was intertwined with understanding the fundamental laws of God's creation. The drive was not solely for personal gain, but for a grander revelation. The legend of the elixir of life in all its forms ultimately speaks to something profoundly human: the refusal to accept our physical limitations. It represents the audacious hope that through wisdom, perseverance, and a touch of the mysterious, we might one day sip from the cup of eternity itself. But the human yearning for immortality isn't always about finding an external potion or achieving a perfected human form. Sometimes it manifests in the most spectacular and symbolic of creatures, a being whose entire existence is a testament to the promise of new beginnings. From the ashes of one life, another rises, more radiant than before. This is the timeless legend of the phoenix, a magnificent firebird whose cyclical rebirth has captivated human imagination for millennia, serving as the ultimate metaphor for immortality through transformation. The earliest tales of this incredible creature emerge from the sun-baked sands of ancient Egypt, where it was known as the Bennu. This heron-like bird was closely associated with the sun god Ra and with the concept of creation and renewal. The Bennu was believed to have flown over the primordial waters at the dawn of time, letting out a cry that determined the nature of all creation. It was a symbol of the Nile's annual flooding, which brought life back to the parched land, and it was deeply connected to the cycle of the sun, which dies each evening in a blaze of fire only to be reborn triumphantly the next morning. For the Egyptians, the Bennu represented the soul of Ra and the idea that death is not an end, but a necessary prelude to a glorious resurrection. This powerful symbol was adopted and adapted by the Greeks, who gave it the name we know best, the phoenix. Derived from the Greek word for crimson, the phoenix was vividly described by historians like Herodotus as a magnificent eagle-sized bird with feathers of brilliant gold and scarlet. The Greek version of the myth added the breathtaking detail of the pyre. At the end of its long life, often said to be 500 years, the phoenix would build a nest of aromatic spices like cinnamon and myrrh. Then, as the sun reached its zenith, the bird would settle into the nest, allow the sun's rays to ignite the spices, and be consumed by a sacred fire. From those very ashes, a new, young phoenix would emerge, ready to begin the cycle anew. This act wasn't seen as a tragic death, but as a triumphant and voluntary transformation. What's truly fascinating is how this core idea of a death and rebirth bird appears independently in cultures with no apparent connection to the Mediterranean. In Chinese mythology, the Feng Huang is a majestic, benevolent bird that represents the empress and the principle of yin, balancing the dragon's yang. While not cyclically reborn in fire, the Feng Huang is an immortal symbol of high virtue and grace, appearing only in times of peace and prosperity to mark a new, harmonious era. Its very presence signals a renewal of cosmic order. Similarly, in Persian mythology, the simurgh is an immense, wise, and compassionate bird seen as so ancient it has witnessed the destruction of the world 3 times over, making it a repository of all knowledge and a guide for heroes. It embodies immortality through wisdom and the enduring power of nature. The phoenix's enduring power lies in its profound symbolism. It is the ultimate emblem of hope. It teaches that destruction can be a form of purification, that from our greatest trials and most painful endings we can emerge renewed and strengthened. Its connection to the sun reinforces this, linking its cycle to the most dependable rhythm of our world. The sun always returns, spring always follows winter. This is why the legend resonated so deeply with early Christians, who saw in the phoenix a perfect parallel for the resurrection of Christ and the promise of eternal life for the soul. The phoenix doesn't cheat death, it transcends it. It shows us that true immortality isn't about avoiding an end, but about embracing the transformation that follows, rising again, forever changed and yet eternally the same. Yet for all their symbolic power, myths like the phoenix offer a form of immortality that is collective and cyclical, a renewal of life itself rather than the enduring existence of a single individual. But what about the deeply personal, visceral fear of losing one's own life and consciousness? For that, we must turn to one of the most ancient and heartbreaking stories ever recorded, a tale that comes to us from the very dawn of civilization, etched into clay tablets in ancient Mesopotamia. This is the story of Gilgamesh, a king who ruled the city of Uruk, and whose epic journey represents the first great existential crisis in literature, a raw human confrontation with the inevitability of death. Gilgamesh starts as the archetypal powerful but arrogant ruler, two-thirds god and one-third man, whose strength and exploits are unmatched. Yet his life lacks meaning until he finds a true equal and friend in Enkidu, a wild man created by the gods to be his counterpart. Together, they undertake great deeds, but their arrogance leads them to slay the bull of heaven, an act of such hubris that the gods decree Enkidu must die. Gilgamesh is utterly devastated by the loss. He watches helplessly as his vibrant, powerful friend slowly succumbs to a wasting illness, and for the first time, the mighty king is consumed by a terror he has never known. He is forced to witness the physical reality of death, the cessation of breath, the cold stillness of the body, and it shatters his worldview. If a hero as full of life as Enkidu can be reduced to nothing but clay, then what fate awaits him? His grief spirals into a paralyzing fear of his own mortality, launching him on a desperate, reckless quest not for glory, but for the one thing that can silence his terror, eternal life. His journey takes him to the very ends of the known world, through darkness and past mythical guardians, all to find the one mortal who had been granted immortality by the gods, Utnapishtim. This ancient sage, a clear precursor to the biblical Noah, had survived a great flood sent by the gods to destroy humanity. As a reward for his obedience, he and his wife were granted eternal life. Gilgamesh pleads with him for the secret, but Utnapishtim offers him a stern lesson on the futility of his quest. He challenges Gilgamesh to a simple test: stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights to prove he can even conquer sleep, the little death. Exhausted from his travels, Gilgamesh fails immediately, falling into a deep slumber, a powerful metaphor for his inability to overcome the most basic human limitations. Seeing his desperation, Utnapishtim's wife takes pity on him. She convinces her husband to tell Gilgamesh of a fallback prize, a thorny plant that lies at the bottom of the sea, a plant that can restore a man's youth. Revitalized with hope, Gilgamesh dives into the watery depths, retrieves the plant, and begins his journey home, ecstatic that he will return to Uruk not just as a king, but as a man who has cheated death. But in a moment of devastating irony, as he stops to bathe in a cool pool of water, a serpent slithers up and steals the plant, immediately shedding its skin and being rejuvenated right before the king's horrified eyes. Gilgamesh sits down and weeps, his final hope literally snatched away by a creature of the earth. This moment is one of the most profound in all of ancient literature. Gilgamesh loses the plant not to a god or a demon, but to a simple snake, an animal that naturally renews itself. This symbolizes the cruel, indifferent nature of the world. Immortality exists, but it is not meant for humanity. Our lot is to live, to love, to lose, and to die. Gilgamesh's ultimate triumph is not in defeating death but in accepting it. He returns to Uruk a wiser, humbler king. He finally understands that while his body is mortal, his legacy can be immortal. He looks upon the mighty walls of his city which he built and realizes that true eternity lies in what we create, the culture we build, and the stories we leave behind. His epic is a 4,000-year-old testament to that very idea, making Gilgamesh himself one of the most enduring legends of all. While Gilgamesh's quest ended in heartbreaking failure, the dream of finding a magical source of youth and vitality refused to die. This longing shifted from a mythical plant to a tangible, life-giving body of water, the legendary fountain of youth. The idea of restorative waters is one of humanity's most persistent and widespread legends, a fantasy that drove kings, explorers, and common folk to the very edges of the map in the hope of drinking from a spring that could turn back time. Unlike the alchemist's complex elixirs, the fountain offered a simple, almost democratic solution. Just one sip could wash away the ravages of age, restoring the vigor and beauty of youth. This wasn't just about immortality, it was about rejuvenation, a reset button for the human body. The legend's roots are ancient and surprisingly global. One of the earliest accounts comes from the Alexander Romance, a collection of stories about the conquests of Alexander the Great. Written centuries after his death, these tales describe the Macedonian king and his army stumbling upon a water-of-life paradise while journeying through a land of darkness. In some versions, a wise man guides Alexander to a spring that restores his youth, but his hubris leads him to lose the precious water. This story, repeated across Europe and the Middle East, established the archetype of the powerful seeker and the elusive restorative waters. Similar stories bubbled up independently elsewhere. In the Hindu epic, the Mahabharata, a great battle is fought over the Amrita, the nectar of immortality which was churned from the cosmic ocean. Japanese folklore speaks of Horai, a mythical mountain paradise where an elixir of life flows. The Celts had wells of wisdom and healing, and even in the pre-Columbian Americas, rumors circulated among indigenous tribes of a sacred river with miraculous properties. But no single figure is more famously tied to this quest than the Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce de Leon. The popular tale, perpetuated by later historians, claims he was explicitly searching for the Fountain of Youth when he landed on the coast of what is now Florida in 1513. While modern scholars debate the accuracy of this specific motive, the story is powerfully symbolic. Ponce de Leon was an aging soldier, his body battered by a life of conquest, seeking new lands, wealth, and perhaps a new lease on life under the authority of the Spanish crown. The lush, mysterious landscape of Florida, with its countless freshwater springs and seemingly magical flora and fauna, was the perfect canvas upon which to project this ancient European fantasy. The indigenous people he encountered, the Timucua and Calusa, likely spoke of their sacred healing waters which only fueled the rumors. His failed expedition and death from a poisoned arrow only cemented the legend, transforming him into its most tragic and iconic seeker. This enduring myth might be more than just fantasy. It often intersects with real-world places known for the longevity and health of their inhabitants. The concept of blue zones, regions like Okinawa in Japan or Sardinia in Italy where people regularly live active lives past 100 years, echoes the fountain's promise. These areas are often associated with mineral-rich water, a healthy diet, and strong social bonds. A natural, holistic recipe for a long life. The legend, in a way, was a prescient metaphor for what we now understand about health and aging. The magic wasn't in a single mystical spring, but in a combination of environment, lifestyle, and community. So why does the idea of a fountain of youth remain so powerfully captivating centuries after Ponce de Leon's quest? It taps into a universal and deeply personal anxiety about aging. we see our own strength wane, our faces change in the mirror, and we yearn for a way to halt or reverse that process. The fountain represents the ultimate victory over decay, a chance to reclaim the energy and potential of our younger selves without losing the wisdom of experience. It is the purest form of hope that a simple, natural cure for our most inevitable fate is still out there, waiting to be discovered. In a modern world obsessed with anti-aging serums, cryotherapy, and genetic research, the quest continues. We may no longer believe in a literal magical spring, but we are still, in our own way, searching for that same elusive water. From the solitary quest of Gilgamesh to the collective dream of a rejuvenating fountain, our search for eternity takes many forms. But in the rich tapestry of Hindu tradition, we find a concept of immortality that is neither a reward nor a potion, but an integral part of the cosmos itself. These are the Chiranjeevis, the long-lived ones, or immortals, a group of 7 extraordinary beings who are fated to live through the entire span of our current age, the Kali Yuga, remaining on Earth until the cosmic cycle resets. Their stories are not just about living forever, they are profound lessons about duty, devotion, curses, and the complex nature of blessing and burden. Foremost among them is perhaps the most tragic figure, Ashwatthama. In the great epic, the Mahabharata, he was a mighty warrior and the son of a great teacher, Dronacharya. Consumed by rage and grief after the unfair death of his father in a great war, he committed a grievous sin. Under the cover of night, he entered the camp of his sleeping enemies and slaughtered their 5 young sons, believing them to be the 5 warrior brothers he sought to destroy. For this horrific act of violating the codes of war, the god Krishna cursed him with a fate many would consider worse than death. He was cursed with immortality for 3,000 years, but his body would be covered in festering wounds and sores that would never heal, and he would wander the earth in utter solitude, shunned by all. Ashwatthama embodies immortality as a divine punishment, a perpetual reminder of his crime, forced to bear witness to the ages as a lonely and suffering outcast. In stark contrast stands the noble Mahabali, a demon king known for his generosity and virtue. His popularity and power became so great that the gods felt threatened. The deity Vishnu, in his dwarf incarnation Vamana, came to Mahabali and asked for a simple gift, as much land as he could cover in 3 steps. The king, true to his nature, gladly agreed. Vishnu then transformed into a cosmic giant, covering the entire universe in 2 steps. With no place left to put his 3rd step, the honorable king offered his own head. Vishnu, impressed by this ultimate act of humility and charity, pushed him into the underworld but granted him a boon. He would be allowed to return to visit his people once a year, a celebration known as Onam, and he would rule as the sovereign of the netherworld until the end of the cycle. His immortality is a reward for his unparalleled goodness, a chance to remain a benevolent and beloved ruler for millennia. The group also includes great sages and chroniclers of time itself. There is Vedvyasa, the compiler of the sacred Vedas and the author of the monumental Mahabharata. He is the eternal witness, the guardian of knowledge who is said to still be alive in the Himalayas, meditating and preserving the wisdom of the ages for the benefit of humanity. Then there is Parashurama, the 6th incarnation of Vishnu, a fierce warrior sage who carries a mighty axe. He is destined to live on as the martial teacher who will reappear to instruct the final avatar, Kalki, at the end of times, thus linking the cosmic cycle from beginning to end. Completing this divine assembly are figures of unwavering loyalty and righteousness. The great god Hanuman, the devoted monkey god who served Lord Rama, was blessed with immortality for his unparalleled devotion and strength. He is believed to still be present on earth, chanting Rama's name and protecting devotees. His presence offers comfort, a living, breathing link to the divine. Vibhishana, the righteous brother of the demon king Ravana who sided with Rama, was made the immortal king of Lanka for choosing duty over blood. and Kripacharya, the master archer and teacher to the princes in the Mahabharata, was granted eternal life to serve as a guide and preceptor to future generations of warriors. Together, the Chiranjeevis represent a complete cosmic system. They are not passive immortals but active participants in the world's destiny, each playing their unique role until the universe is ready to be reborn. This brings us to a pantheon of gods whose very existence is defined by a fragile, borrowed immortality, the Norse gods of Asgard. Their form of eternal life stands in stark contrast to many others we've explored because it is neither a spiritual state nor a guaranteed divine right. Instead, it is a physical necessity, a sustenance they must consume to stave off the aging and decay that even they are subject to. Their youth and vitality are maintained by one singular, magical source, the golden apples grown and guarded by the goddess Idun. In the heart of Asgard, Idun's orchard is the wellspring of the god's power. She possesses a casket or chest that holds an endless supply of these radiant fruits. When the gods feel the first tremors of age, the weakening of their limbs or the dimming of their sight, they must partake of Idun's apples. With a single bite, their vigor is restored, their youth renewed, and their divinity preserved. This isn't a one-time event, it's a continual process, making their immortality conditional and deeply vulnerable. They are not inherently deathless, they are perpetually dependent. Idun, whose name is thought to mean the rejuvenating one, is therefore arguably the most important deity in the entire Norse pantheon. Without her and her apples, the entire order of Asgard would crumble into old age and frailty. This precarious balance is thrown into chaos in one of the most thrilling Norse myths. The cunning trickster god Loki is captured by the giant Tjazi. To secure his own release, Loki promises Tjazi the one thing the giant truly desires, Idun and her apples. Loki returns to Asgard and, using his silver tongue, tricks Idun into following him outside the walls of Asgard, claiming he has found apples even more wondrous than her own that she should see. The moment she steps beyond the safety of the realm, the giant Tjazi, in his eagle form, swoops down, snatches Idun in his talons, and carries her off to his frozen, distant home, Jotunheim. The consequences for the gods are immediate and devastating. Cut off from their source of rejuvenation, they begin to age rapidly. Their hair turns gray and thin, their skin wrinkles, their strength fades, and a deep fatigue sets over the halls of Asgard. The mighty Aesir, the warriors and rulers of the Nine Worlds, are suddenly facing the mortal fragility they so often scorned. They quickly deduce Loki's treachery and confront him, threatening him with terrible torture unless he rescues Idun. Transforming into a falcon, Loki flies to Tjazi's fortress, uses his magic to turn Idun into a nut, and clutches her in his claws for a frantic escape back to Asgard. The enraged Tjazi gives chase in his eagle form, but as he closes in on the gates of Asgard, the gods light a great fire. Tjazi flies straight into the blaze, his feathers are scorched, and he plummets to the ground where he is swiftly killed by the waiting gods. Order is restored, Idun distributes her apples, and the gods are made young once more. This story is far more than just an exciting adventure. It is a profound reflection of the core Norse worldview. Unlike many mythologies where gods are omnipotent and eternal by nature, the Norse gods are powerful but fundamentally fragile. They can be tricked, injured, and they will ultimately die. Their need for Idun's apples underscores a universal and inescapable truth in this cosmology. Everything, even the divine, is subject to entropy and decay. Nothing lasts forever without effort and sustenance. This directly foreshadows the Norse concept of fate, the cataclysmic event known as Ragnarök. This is not merely the end of the world, but the twilight of the gods, a preordained series of events where the greatest gods, including Odin and Thor, will fall in battle against monstrous forces. Their immortality, granted by the apples, only extends their time. It does not exempt them from their ultimate destiny. Ragnarök is the final, brutal confirmation that their existence was always on borrowed time. Theirs is a tragic, heroic immortality. They know how their story ends, yet they continue to strive to rule and to prepare for the final battle with courage. This acceptance of a doomed fate, coupled with the will to face it with honor, is what makes the Norse conception of existence so powerfully resonant. It speaks not to a hope of escaping the end, but to the nobility of living well and fiercely with the time one is given, whether you are a mortal human or a god sipping from the cup of youth. But even among the gods, the gift of eternal life was not always a blessing, and one Greek myth captures this tragic irony with devastating clarity. This is the story of Tithonus, a mortal prince of Troy whose beauty caught the eye of Eos, the radiant goddess of the dawn. Each morning, she would rise from her bed, painting the sky with hues of rose and gold, and it was said that she fell so deeply in love with the young mortal that she could not bear the thought of their time together ending. Determined to keep her beloved by her side forever, Eos made a bold request to Zeus, the king of the gods. She pleaded with him to grant Tithonus the ultimate gift, immortality. Zeus, perhaps moved by her passion or swayed by her grace, agreed to her wish. But in her joyous haste, Eos made a catastrophic oversight. She had asked for eternal life for Tithonus, but she had forgotten to specify one crucial accompanying gift, eternal youth. At first, all was bliss. Tithonus remained the handsome, vibrant prince, and he and Eos lived in happiness. But the passing decades, which meant nothing to an immortal goddess, began to take their terrible toll on the mortal man. The immortality granted by Zeus was a literal one. It prevented Tithonus from dying, but it did not halt the natural process of aging. Where a normal human life would have gracefully concluded, Tithonus's continued endlessly into frailty. His strong limbs grew weak and thin, his back began to stoop, and his once smooth skin became a web of wrinkles. He grew increasingly feeble, requiring constant care, a shell of the man Eos had once loved. The goddess, whose very essence was renewal and fresh beginnings each morning, was now chained to a living embodiment of endless decay. Her love, though likely still present, became mixed with pity and a heavy burden of regret. The myth describes his voice weakening to a constant, thin, rasping whisper, a helpless sound that echoed through her halls. The situation became so unbearable that the once vibrant goddess could no longer bear the sight of her eternally aging husband. Different versions of the tale describe her final solution. In one, she locked him away in a solitary room where he lay forever in a bedridden state, babbling endlessly to himself, a prisoner of his own endless life. In the more poetic and widespread version, taking pity on his miserable existence, she used her divine power to transform him. She turned the withered, whispering old man into a cicada. This transformation was a strange kind of mercy. The cicada, according to ancient Greek belief, was an insect that lived a long life underground before emerging to sing its rasping song through the hot summer days. In this new form, Tithonus could continue his existence, his continuous, dry chirp becoming a familiar sound of the season, a natural part of the world rather than a horrifying aberration. The story of Tithonus is one of the most profound and haunting cautionary tales about immortality ever conceived. It is a stark warning about the danger of asking for a gift without considering all its consequences. It asks a deeply unsettling question: what is the value of a life that never ends if it is a life stripped of all vitality, strength, and joy? True immortality, the myth suggests, is not merely the absence of death, but the preservation of the self in a state worth preserving. Tithonus's fate is a direct contrast to that of the Norse gods, who renewed their youth, and the Chinese immortals, who perfected their spirits. His story reminds us that to live forever as a faded, helpless version of oneself is not a blessing, but one of the cruelest curses imaginable. The cicada's song, even today, can be heard as a melancholic reminder of that tragic oversight, a whisper from mythology that begs us to be careful what we wish for. Yet, if the story of tithoness shows us the horror of a life that decays without end, humanity has conjured an even darker and more prevalent vision of this dread, the vampire. Across the globe, in cultures separated by vast oceans and millennia, an eerily similar creature emerges from the shadows, a being whose immortality is not a blessing of the gods but a terrible curse of undeath. This is not a triumphant rising like the phoenix, but a grotesque perversion of life itself, where the soul is trapped in a decaying body that must feed on the living to sustain its wretched existence. From the Strigoi of Eastern Europe to the Jiangshi of China, these legends represent our deepest fears about death, disease, and the monstrous consequences of life extending far beyond its natural boundary. The most iconic of these figures is, of course, the European vampire, immortalized in folklore and later literature. In places like Romania and Serbia, the Strigoi or vampire was not a glamorous count but a terrifying revenant, a corpse that refused to stay in its grave. It was often blamed for sudden outbreaks of disease in a village, particularly tuberculosis, which would mysteriously waste away entire families. The vampire was a parasite, a bloated, ruddy-faced creature that would rise from the earth at night to drain the life force or blood from its living relatives. Its immortality was a bleak, predatory cycle. It fed to sustain its animation, and its victims were often doomed to rise and join its ranks, spreading like a plague. The methods to destroy it were brutally physical, reflecting a peasant understanding of ensuring something was truly dead. A stake through the heart to pin it to the earth, decapitation or burning. Its aversion to sunlight, holy symbols, and garlic all point to a creature that exists in opposition to life, purity, and the natural order. It is a symbol of contagion, a literal embodiment of the fear that death is not an end but a contagious state that can reach out from the grave to claim the living. But this concept is far from unique to Europe. On the other side of the world, ancient Chinese folklore developed its own terrifying version of the undead, the Jiangshi, often translated as stiff corpse. Unlike the often suave European vampire, the Jiangshi is a pitiful and horrifying sight. It is a reanimated corpse, its limbs stiff from rigor mortis, forcing it to move with a distinctive hopping motion with its arms outstretched. It is often depicted in the robes of a Qing dynasty official, with pale greenish skin, long white hair, and a visible trail of moldy breath. The Jiangshi does not typically drink blood. Instead, it steals the life essence or kai from a living person, killing them. Its creation was often attributed to improper burial, a violent death, or a soul that refused to pass on due to unfinished business. The methods to stop it are equally fascinating, involving Taoist magic, mirrors to reflect its own lifelessness back at it, and the use of sticky rice, which was believed to absorb negative energy. The Jiangshi reflects a cultural fear of disrespecting the dead and the cosmic chaos that ensues when the proper funeral rites are not observed. It is a reminder that a peaceful afterlife is not guaranteed, and that improper death could lead to a monstrous half-life. What is truly astonishing is how these core themes appear in legends from every corner of the globe. In India, there is the Bhuta or Vatala, a spiteful spirit that haunts cemeteries and possesses the dead. In the Philippines, the Manananggal is a horrifying creature that separates its upper torso from its lower body to fly on bat-like wings and feed on unborn children. The Aztecs had the Cihuatateo, the spirits of women who died in childbirth, who are said to descend to steal the lives of children at night. The common threads are undeniable: a twisted form of life after death, a need to feed on the vital force of the living, an aversion to sunlight and symbols of purity, and a profound connection to disease and misfortune. Ultimately, these global vampire myths are not really about monsters at all. They are about us. They are narratives born from a primal fear of the unknown that follows our final breath. Before modern medicine, a wasting illness that spread through a family looked like something supernatural was draining them. The natural process of decomposition, where a body might bloat with gas and blood might seep from the mouth, was terrifying evidence that the dead might not be at rest. The vampire is the ultimate metaphor for the fear that death is not an end, but a beginning of something far worse. It represents the horror of the hungry past consuming the present, of old grudges and traumas that refuse to stay buried. It is our dark suspicion that immortality, if achieved without wisdom or grace, would not be a divine state, but a predatory and eternally lonely nightmare. In stark contrast to the predatory immortality of the vampire, there is another legendary figure whose eternal life is framed not as a biological curse, but as a divine sentence for a single, fleeting moment of cruelty. This is the haunting tale of the wandering Jew, a man condemned to walk the earth until the second coming for an act of disrespect committed against Jesus Christ on his way to the crucifixion. While the vampire myth explores the horror of feeding on life, this Christian legend delves into the profound psychological torment of being a perpetual outsider, an eternal witness to the relentless march of history, forever separated from the peace of death and the comfort of community. The core of the story is deceptively simple. As Jesus, carrying the heavy cross, stumbled on the road to Golgotha, he paused to rest for a moment against the door of a Jewish shoemaker. The man, named Ahasuerus in later versions, scornfully told him to move on and not linger. Jesus responded with a fateful decree, "I stand and rest, but you will go on forever." In that instant, the shoemaker was cursed with immortality, forced to wander the earth without rest or respite, a living ghost whose lifespan would encompass the entirety of human history until the end of days. He becomes a permanent spectator, watching empires rise and crumble, generations bloom and fade, all while he remains unchanged, a solitary figure on an endless road. This legend first emerged in written form in 13th century Europe, appearing in the Flores Historiarum by Roger of Wendover, where the figure is named Cartaphilus. It exploded in popularity during the Reformation, a period of immense religious and social upheaval. The story was powerfully malleable, its meaning shifting with the teller. For some, the wandering Jew was an anti-Semitic caricature, a symbol of a people punished for their alleged rejection of Christ, destined to be ruthless and persecuted. For others, however, he transcended this hateful origin, becoming a more universal archetype, the embodiment of eternal penance. His immortality was his purgatory, his endless journey was his prayer. He was not a monster, but a profoundly tragic figure, serving as a stark warning against the sins of hard-heartedness and a lack of compassion. What makes the legend so psychologically compelling is the nature of his punishment. He is not imprisoned in a tomb or a single place, but is given the entire world as his prison. He is surrounded by humanity, yet utterly alone, forever the stranger in every land. He is the ultimate observer, accumulating vast knowledge and wisdom across the centuries, but this knowledge is a burden, not a gift. He forms connections only to watch everyone he ever meets wither and die. His curse is a profound alienation from the human condition itself, the shared journey from birth to death that binds all people together. He is denied that final rest, making him an exile from the most fundamental human experience. This theme resonated so deeply that the figure of the wandering Jew appeared in countless works of art, literature, and music for centuries. He is a poignant character in poems by Percy Bysshe Shelley and William Wordsworth, and a central figure in Eugene Sue's influential 19th century novel, which transformed him into a heroic revolutionary. With each retelling, the legend was adapted. Sometimes he was a warning, other times a prophet. In some tales, he occasionally appears to deliver cryptic wisdom or to offer a warning to society, his ancient eyes having seen the cyclical nature of human folly and arrogance. He is history's lonely conscience, a man who has seen it all and is doomed to watch us repeat our mistakes. Beyond its religious origins, the story taps into a deep, modern anxiety about time and legacy. In a world that often feels like it is accelerating at a breakneck pace, there is a fear of being left behind, of becoming obsolete. The Wandering Jew is the ultimate expression of that fear, a man forever out of sync with his surroundings. His curse makes him a mirror for our own contemplation of what it would truly mean to live forever. Would the accumulation of knowledge and experience be a wonderful gift, or would the endless loss of loved ones and the constant change of the world around you become an unbearable weight? The legend answers with a devastating clarity. Immortality without the release of death is not a victory over time, but the most profound form of servitude to it. He wanders not to see the wonders of the world, but in a hopeless search for the one thing he can never have, an end. And yet, within these tales of immortal curses and eternal wandering, we find a philosophy that redefines the very concept of everlasting existence. This is not about extending life, but about ending the very need for it. We now turn to a tradition that offers perhaps the most profound and liberating form of immortality imaginable, one achieved not by a magical elixir or divine boon, but through immense personal effort and spiritual mastery. This is the path of the Arhats in Buddhist tradition, enlightened beings who have reached the pinnacle of spiritual achievement and escaped the endless cycle of rebirth known as samsara. The term Arhat translates to one who is worthy or the perfected one. Unlike the immortal beings we've encountered so far, an Arhat does not seek to live forever in a physical body. In fact, their entire goal is the opposite, to achieve a state so beyond the physical that they are no longer compelled to take birth in any form. Their immortality is purely spiritual, a liberation from the relentless wheel of life, death, and suffering. They have extinguished the three poisons of the mind: greed, hatred, and delusion. And in doing so, they have snuffed out the very fuels that feed the cycle of rebirth. For them, the ultimate victory is not an endless lifespan, but the final, peaceful silence of nirvana, a state beyond all conception, including the concepts of life and death as we understand them. The journey to become an Arhat is a rigorous and structured one, primarily outlined in the Theravada Buddhist tradition. It's not a path for the casual seeker. It requires a profound commitment to the Buddha's teachings, known as the Dharma, and a life of disciplined meditation and ethical conduct. The aspirant progresses through 4 distinct stages of enlightenment, each one cutting through more layers of illusion and attachment. The first stage is entering the stream, where one gains their first direct insight into the true nature of reality and is guaranteed to achieve enlightenment within 7 lifetimes. The second stage is the once returner, who will only be reborn into the human world one more time. The third is the non-returner, who will not return to the human realm but will achieve nirvana from a higher plane of existence. And the final stage is the Arhat, who has completely uprooted all defilements and will be released from the body at death, experiencing no further rebirth. Among the most revered Arhats are the Buddha's closest disciples, whose stories serve as inspirational guides for all who follow the path. There is Sariputta, renowned for his unparalleled wisdom and his deep understanding of the Abhidharma, the intricate philosophical psychology of Buddhism. His counterpart was Moggallana, who was famed for his psychic powers, which he used not for show, but to help others understand the workings of karma. The Buddha's faithful attendant, Ananda, who memorized all of the Buddha's discourses, only achieved arhatship on the night before the first Buddhist council in a final, powerful surge of effort. Perhaps one of the most compelling figures is Angulimala, a former murderer who wore a gruesome necklace of fingers from his victims. After a transformative encounter with the Buddha, he renounced his violent ways, ordained as a monk, and through sincere practice, attained the state of an Arhat, becoming a powerful testament to the idea that redemption and ultimate liberation are available to all, regardless of their past. The key distinction here, and the core of this unique philosophical approach, is the difference between longevity and liberation. A Chinese Taoist immortal might seek to refine their physical body to live for thousands of years within this world. A Hindu yogi might use techniques to extend their life for centuries to have more time for spiritual practice. But the Arhat's goal is not to stay in the world longer, it is to graduate from it entirely. Theirs is an immortality of the spirit, not the flesh. The physical body of an Arhat is still subject to aging, illness, and death. When an Arhat dies, it is called their parinirvana, their final, complete extinguishing. They do not go to a heaven or a paradise, they are not reborn anywhere. They have simply, utterly, and finally gone beyond. This represents a radical reimagining of eternal existence. It shifts the focus from a quantitative measure, how long one lives, to a qualitative one, how one is freed. The endless life of a vampire or the wandering Jew is seen in Buddhism as the ultimate nightmare, an extension of samsaric suffering. True peace, true immortality, is found not in duration but in cessation. The Arhat shows us that the most powerful form of eternity is not about adding more time, but about transcending time itself, achieving a state of being so complete that the very notion of a beginning or an end simply ceases to apply. It is the ultimate liberation, offering a peace that truly is everlasting. While the Arhat achieves liberation by transcending the cycle of life and death, our journey through the legends of immortality now takes us to the misty forests of Arthurian Britain, to a figure whose eternal existence is woven from magic, prophecy, and paradox. This is the enigmatic Merlin, the great wizard and advisor to King Arthur, whose lifespan is not a single, simple state but a complex web of different legends, each offering its own explanation for his seemingly endless years. His is an immortality that serves a grand narrative purpose, acting as the vital bridge between the ancient, wild magic of the old world and the emerging chivalric ideals of Camelot. Perhaps the most fascinating origin story for his longevity comes from his demonic ancestry. In the version popularized by Geoffrey of Monmouth and later expanded upon, Merlin is a Cambion, the son of a mortal woman and an incubus, a powerful demon of the air. This infernal heritage granted him a unique constitution, bestowing upon him not only his vast prophetic powers but also a lifespan that far exceeded that of any ordinary human. His immortality in this context is an innate trait, a birthright from a supernatural father that sets him apart from the very humanity he is destined to guide. Yet this gift is also a burden, linking him to a dark legacy that he must constantly overcome through his wisdom and service to the light. It's a classic tale of nature versus nurture, where Merlin uses the powers of his demonic lineage for a noble cause, forever wrestling with the dual nature within himself. Other tales attribute his long life not to his bloodline but to his immense knowledge. Merlin is the keeper of ancient secrets, a master of the arcane arts who understands the hidden laws of the universe. He knows the properties of herbs and stones, the language of animals, and the motions of the stars. This profound wisdom might have included esoteric techniques for prolonging life, learned from even more ancient sources or discovered through his own unparalleled intellect. His immortality in this light is an achievement, something earned through a lifetime of study and spiritual discipline, much like an alchemist seeking the elixir of life. He becomes a symbol of knowledge as the ultimate power, a force that can even conquer time itself. Beyond biology or magic, some interpretations suggest Merlin exists in a unique relationship with time itself. As a prophet, he does not experience past, present, and future as a straight line. For him, they are a landscape he can survey. This ability to see all times at once creates a kind of existential immortality. He is not merely living for centuries, he is perceiving the entirety of history simultaneously, making his consciousness eternal. He is less a man growing old and more a fixed point outside the temporal stream, watching the river of time flow by. This perspective makes him a profoundly lonely figure, a timeless witness to the rise and fall of kingdoms, forever guiding humanity based on an understanding they can never fully comprehend. And then there is the legend of his final imprisonment, which presents a far more tragic and ironic form of eternity. The story tells of Merlin becoming infatuated with a beautiful enchantress named Nimue, also called Vivienne, the Lady of the Lake. Enthralled by her, he agrees to teach her all his magical secrets. Using the very arts he taught her against him, Nimue ensnares Merlin. In some versions, she traps him within a tower of air, invisible and inescapable. In the most famous telling, she uses his own spells to seal him within a tomb of stone or a great tree, often a hawthorn, leaving him conscious but utterly powerless, unable to move or interact with the world. He is left there, alive and aware, trapped for all eternity. This isn't a glorious immortality but a cruel punishment, a warning about the dangers of unchecked desire and the potential for knowledge to be turned against its master. His eternal life becomes his prison sentence. Ultimately, Merlin's multiple immortalities serve a crucial function in the Arthurian mythos. He is the necessary link that connects the chaotic, primal power of the ancient world, symbolized by his demonic father and his wild, forest-dwelling early years, with the structured Christian chivalric order of Camelot. His vast age provides a continuity of wisdom and purpose, allowing him to engineer the birth of Arthur, guide his kingship, and set the stage for the quest for the Holy Grail. He embodies the idea that for a new and brighter age to be born, it must be midwifed by the deep, often ambiguous wisdom of the old world. He is the timeless catalyst for timeless legends, ensuring that the arc of the story stretches from the deepest past to the farthest future, all held together by the magic of a man who, in one form or another, lives forever. Shifting from the mystical prisons of wizards and the spiritual liberation of sages, we now enter the shadowy realm of a brotherhood whose very name became a byword for terror and whose legend promised a most deceitful form of paradise. In the fortress-dotted mountains of Persia and Syria during the Middle Ages, a secretive sect known as the Nizari Ismailis, but immortalized in history as the Hashashin, perfected the art of political assassination. But beyond their fearsome reputation for precision and ruthlessness, a far more tantalizing story began to circulate, one that wove together fact and fantasy to explain their fanatical devotion. This was the legend of their celestial gardens, a fabricated heaven on earth designed to grant their followers a hallucinogenic taste of immortality and ensure their loyalty beyond death. The historical Nizari Ismailis were a Shia Muslim sect led by a charismatic and formidable figure known as the Old Man of the Mountain, Hassan I Sabah. Politically and militarily outmatched by the vast Seljuk Empire and later by the Crusader states, they turned to asymmetric warfare. They did not raise vast armies. Instead, they trained a highly disciplined cadre of operatives to carry out targeted, high-profile assassinations of enemy commanders, governors, and scholars. Their chosen method was the dagger, often wielded in broad daylight in a public market or mosque, a tactic designed to generate maximum psychological impact and spread fear far beyond the act itself. Their seemingly unshakable loyalty, their willingness to carry out missions that were effectively suicide attacks, baffled and terrified their enemies. How could the Old Man of the Mountain command such absolute, fearless obedience? This is where history begins to blend with mythology. The most famous and colorful explanation comes from the travels of the Venetian merchant Marco Polo. In his accounts, he describes visiting the valley of Alamat, the sect's mountain stronghold. He tells a story of the old man constructing the most magnificent secret gardens, painstakingly designed to mirror the Quran's description of paradise. Within its walls were flowing rivers of wine, milk, and honey, beautiful palaces adorned with gold, and lush orchards filled with every kind of fruit. Most importantly, it was populated by lovely attendants ready to fulfill every desire. According to Polo, the old man would identify young men with potential. drug them with a powerful substance, often said to be hashish, from which the name hashashin is derived, and have them carried unconscious into this garden. They would awaken in what appeared to be heaven itself, spending several days in a blissful stupor, indulging in all its sensual pleasures, convinced they had died as martyrs and been granted eternal reward. Then they would be drugged again and removed. Upon waking back in the fortress, the old man would present himself as a divine proxy, a man who could grant them passage back to this paradise, but only if they obeyed his every command without question and carried out the dangerous missions he assigned. The promise was that a martyr's death in his service would guarantee their immediate return to that garden for eternity. This powerful narrative of drugged assassins and a fake heaven created an immortal legend around the Hashashin, cementing their image in the Western mind as mystical, fanatical, and otherworldly. It's a story that perfectly explains the unexplainable devotion of the fighters. However, most modern historians regard Marco Polo's tale as a compelling piece of folklore rather than literal fact. There is little to no contemporary evidence from Nizari sources to support the existence of such elaborate gardens at Alamat. The name Hashashin itself was likely a derogatory label applied by their enemies, implying they were lowly hashish users, a term meant to delegitimize them rather than describe their practices. So if the Paradise Garden was likely a myth, what was the real source of their famed loyalty? The truth is arguably even more fascinating. The Nizari were a highly disciplined and theologically sophisticated community. Their devotion stemmed from a deep, genuine religious conviction. They believed their imam, the old man of the mountain, was a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad and an infallible spiritual guide. To follow his command was to follow the will of God. Obedience was a religious duty, and martyrdom in the course of that duty was a guaranteed path to the actual paradise promised in the Quran. Their training was intense, involving not just physical combat but also deep theological study and intellectual debate. They weren't mindless drones, they were deeply committed ideological soldiers. The enduring power of the Hashashin legend lies in this perfect collision of historical reality and mythological explanation. For their terrified enemies, the idea that these men were drugged and tricked was easier to accept than the notion that their faith could be so strong. The Paradise myth provided a neat, sensational story that has captivated audiences for centuries, influencing everything from medieval Crusader chronicles to modern video games. It speaks to a universal curiosity about the limits of human loyalty and the lengths to which power will go to secure it. Whether through divine promise or an earthly illusion, the legend of the Hashashin endures as a dark and mesmerizing chapter in humanity's eternal fascination with sacrificing mortality for a greater, everlasting reward. From the political intrigues of the Hashashin, we journey now to the serene yet demanding peaks of ancient Japan, where a different kind of immortal was sought not through allegiance to a leader, but through a profound, solitary communion with nature. High in the sacred mountains, far from the bustling villages and imperial courts, a unique class of ascetics pursued a path of ultimate self-mastery. These were the Senin and the Hijiri, legendary hermits and holy men who are believed to have achieved astonishing longevity and supernatural powers through decades of grueling spiritual and physical discipline. The distinction between the two terms is subtle but important. A Hijiri is generally a general term for a holy person, a mountain ascetic who has withdrawn from worldly life to pursue Buddhist teachings and Shinto purity. A Senin, often translated as mountain immortal or wizard, is a Hijiri who has advanced so far along this path that they have attained a semi-divine status, possessing magical abilities and an extremely extended lifespan, essentially becoming a Japanese version of a Taoist immortal. Their entire existence was dedicated to the pursuit of Shinjin Datsuraku, the complete shedding of the earthly self. One of the most revered figures in this tradition is Kyukai, known posthumously as Kobo Daishi, the founder of the Shingon school of esoteric Buddhism. While a historical figure, his legend is saturated with tales of supernatural attainment. It is said that he did not die in the conventional sense in the year 835, but instead entered a state of deep meditation in his tomb at Mount Koya, where he remains eternally awaiting the arrival of the future Buddha Maitreya. For over 1,000 years, monks have delivered meals to his mausoleum, believing he is still alive in a suspended state, sustaining the world with his spiritual power. This belief grants him a form of living immortality, making him a perpetual protector of Japan and a testament to the potential of human spiritual evolution. Another foundational character is En-no Gyoja, the ascetic, a semi-legendary 7th century mystic considered the father of Shujendo, the path of training to achieve spiritual power. This tradition is a fascinating synthesis of ancient Japanese mountain worship, Shinto animism, Taoist practices, and esoteric Buddhism. Followers of Shujendo, known as Yamabushi, or those who lie down in the mountains, undertake severe ascetic practices called shugyo. They stand under freezing waterfalls to purify the body and focus the mind, meditate for days on precarious cliff edges confronting their own mortality, and undertake long, treacherous pilgrimages across mountain ranges. The goal of these extreme trials was twofold: to accumulate spiritual power and to achieve a state of oneness with the kami, the sacred spirits of the mountains. The legendary abilities, or siddhi, attributed to those who succeeded read like a catalogue of superhuman feats. They were said to be able to fly through the air, walk on water, command demons, and control the weather. A sennin was often depicted with iconic symbols of their power. They might be accompanied by a magical familiar, most commonly a turtle or a crane, both ancient Chinese symbols of longevity. They were also shown carrying a scroll of wisdom or a gourd containing the elixir of life, or a precious peach from the tree of immortality, much like their Taoist counterparts in China. These weren't just powers for show. They were seen as the natural byproduct of a life so perfectly aligned with the cosmic order that the practitioner could manipulate its very fabric. This pursuit of physical and spiritual immortality was deeply intertwined with the geography of Japan itself. The mountains were not just a backdrop for their training. They were seen as living, breathing entities, the sacred dwelling places of gods and Buddhas. Each peak was a spiritual realm to be ascended, both literally and metaphorically. The Yamabushi's journey up the mountain symbolized the arduous path to enlightenment, moving from the mundane world at the base to the divine, immortal realm at the summit. By immersing themselves in the most raw and powerful aspects of nature, these ascetics sought to internalize that power, to become as enduring and timeless as the ancient mountains themselves. The legacy of the sennin is a powerful reminder that the quest for immortality is not always about seeking a potion or a prize. For these Japanese ascetics, it was a total way of being, a relentless process of refining both body and spirit through direct engagement with the elements. They sought not to escape the world, but to merge with its most fundamental forces, achieving a state of existence where the line between the human and the divine, the mortal and the immortal, was forever blurred. Yet another vessel promising life everlasting emerges not from the obscurity of mountain sects, but from the very heart of Christian mythology, only to be transformed by legend into something far more mystical. We now come to one of the most powerful and enduring symbols in all of Western lore, the Holy Grail. This sacred object began its story as a poignant relic of the Passion of Christ, but evolved over centuries into the ultimate immortality-granting artifact, a symbol of divine grace that could heal the land, restore youth, and grant eternal sustenance to the worthy. Its journey from a simple cup to a cosmic life force is a fascinating tale of myth-making, revealing our deepest desires for spiritual and physical renewal. The Grail's earliest roots are firmly planted in Christian scripture and apocryphal texts, though it is never explicitly named. The most common association is with Joseph of Arimathea, the wealthy follower of Jesus who offered his own tomb for Christ's burial. Medieval romances, particularly the work of Robert de Boron in the late 12th century, expanded this story dramatically. In these tales, Joseph is said to have used the very cup from the Last Supper to catch the blood and sweat of Christ as he hung on the cross. This act sanctified the vessel, infusing it with immense sacred power. Joseph himself, according to the story, was then imprisoned for years, sustained solely by the Grail's divine presence, which provided him with heavenly nourishment and comfort. This established the Grail's first miraculous property, its ability to sustain life indefinitely through spiritual means, making its keeper an involuntary immortal, much like the wandering Jew, but blessed rather than cursed. However, the legend truly blossomed when it was woven into the fabric of King Arthur's court. Here, the Grail transformed from a historical relic into a mystical, elusive goal for the Knights of the Round Table. It became the centerpiece of a quest that was less about finding a physical object and more about achieving a state of spiritual perfection. The Grail was now described in fantastical terms, sometimes as a stone that fell from heaven, other times as a dazzling chalice that could only be seen by those pure of heart. It was said to provide not just spiritual sustenance, but also the most exquisite foods and drinks, satisfying every desire and granting eternal youth and freedom from corruption. In the seminal work Le Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Malory, the knight Sir Galahad, the purest of all, is ultimately granted a vision of the Grail's divine mysteries and chooses to die at the moment of his greatest ecstasy, his soul ascending to heaven. For him, the true immortality was not earthly life, but heavenly transcendence, a theme echoing the Buddhist arhat's pursuit of nirvana. This quest for the Grail is inextricably linked to one of mythology's most powerful themes, the wounded king and the barren land. This is most vividly embodied in the figure of the Fisher King, the guardian of the Grail who suffers from a terrible, unhealing wound, often to his thigh or groin. His personal affliction is mirrored in his kingdom, which has become a desolate wasteland. The crops fail, the rivers run dry, and the people live in sorrow. The land and the king are one. His physical impotence translates to the land's spiritual and agricultural sterility. This connection creates a profound symbiosis. The king cannot be healed until the land is restored, and the land cannot be restored until the king is healed. The Grail is the only thing that can reverse this decay, but it remains just out of reach, a constant reminder of what has been lost. The resolution of this myth lies in a simple yet profound act. The hero of the Grail quest, whether it is Percival or Galahad, must arrive at the Grail castle and witness a mysterious procession of the Grail and other holy items. The key to breaking the curse is not found in battle or magic, but in an act of compassionate inquiry. The hero must ask the simple question, whom does the Grail serve? This question is the catalyst for healing. It signifies a shift from selfish pursuit to selfless concern for another's suffering. By asking it, the hero acknowledges the king's pain and the land's plight. This act of empathy is what finally allows the Grail's power to flow, healing the Fisher King's wound and restoring life and fertility to the wasted kingdom. The granting of immortality here is collective. It is the resurrection of an entire realm through an act of pure compassion. The legend of the Holy Grail, in its fullest expression, becomes a grand synthesis of the immortality myths we have explored. It possesses the life-sustaining power of Idun's apples, requiring a form of consumption for its benefits. It offers the spiritual liberation of the Arhat's path, demanding ultimate purity. It presents a wasteland that echoes the desolation surrounding a vampire's presence, and a wound as lingering and tragic as that of the Fisher King's Mesopotamian counterpart, Gilgamesh. The Grail is the ultimate symbol because it represents immortality not as a solitary prize, but as a state of grace that heals the individual, the community, and the very world itself, binding them all together in a sacred, life-giving covenant. But our exploration of eternal existence now leads us to the misty shores and verdant hills of the ancient Celts. whose concept of immortality was not a potion or a heavenly reward but an entire parallel dimension. For them, the veil between our world and the next was whisper thin, and everlasting life was not something to be achieved so much as it was a place one could stumble into, often by accident or invitation. This is the realm of the Celtic otherworld, a spectrum of enchanting and sometimes perilous realms like Tir na and Og, the land of youth, and Anon, the Welsh underworld. Here, time itself behaves differently, flowing at an imperceptible pace, rendering its inhabitants ageless and deathless, existing in a state of perpetual feasting, music, and joy, just a magical mist away from mortal reality. The most famous tale that illustrates the deceptive nature of this timeless realm is the story of Oisin and Niam of the Golden Hair. Oisin, a mighty warrior of the Fianna and son of the legendary hero Fionn mac Cumhaill, was visited by the radiant Princess Niam, who arrived from across the sea on a magnificent white horse. She invited him to return with her to Tir na and Og, a land where happiness lasted forever and no one ever grew old. Enchanted by her beauty and the promise of adventure, Oisin mounted the horse behind her and they galloped across the waves. Upon arrival, he found a paradise beyond imagining. He feasted, hunted, and loved Niam, and what felt like 3 joyful years passed in what seemed like the blink of an eye. Yet a homesickness for Ireland and his father's people began to gnaw at him. He asked Niam if he could return for a brief visit. Reluctantly, she agreed but gave him one solemn warning: he must not let his feet touch the soil of the mortal world. She provided him with the same white horse to carry him. Oisin returned to Ireland to find everything utterly changed. The familiar fortresses were in ruins, replaced by smaller, unfamiliar buildings. The mighty warriors of the Fianna were nowhere to be found, and the people he met seemed small and weak. As he searched in confusion, he came upon a group of men struggling to lift a heavy stone. Leaning down from his saddle to help them, his grip slipped and he tumbled to the ground. The moment he touched the earth, the centuries he had spent in Tir na and Og crashed down upon him instantly. The magical horse vanished, and Oisin transformed from a youthful hero into a frail, blind old man, 300 years of aging happening in a single breath. He learned that his father and all his comrades were long dead, existing only in legends and songs. He had his visit home, but at the ultimate cost, becoming a living relic of a bygone age, forever separated from his immortal paradise by a single, tragic misstep. This story perfectly encapsulates the Celtic view of the otherworld's relationship with our own. Time is not universal, it is relative and fluid. A day in Tir na and Og could be a century in Ireland. This reflects a cosmological perspective where eternity isn't a linear progression forward but a simultaneous existence happening just beside us, accessible through ancient burial mounds called Shia, sudden sea mists, or at liminal times like Samhain, when the boundaries between worlds are at their weakest. The inhabitants of these realms are the Aos Shi or the Tuatha De Danann, the people of the mounds, often called the fairy folk. After being defeated by the Milesians, the ancestors of the modern Irish, the Tuatha De Danann were said to have retreated into the otherworld, living on as an immortal, powerful race beneath the very hills of Ireland. They are not gods in the omnipotent Greek sense, but they are mighty, long-lived beings of magic who demand respect. Their immortality is a natural state of being within their own realm, but it is also a choice. They represent a different path not taken by humanity. While mortals are bound to the cycle of birth, decay, and death, the Aos Shi exist in a state of perpetual vitality and power, forever beautiful and young, engaged in their own endless conflicts, loves, and festivities. They sometimes meddle in human affairs, stealing cattle, enchanting mortals to join them in their dances, or spiriting away human children and leaving changelings in their place. This interaction is rarely benevolent. The otherworld is a place of awe and danger, where the gifts of the Shi can be as treacherous as their curses. A sip of their wine might grant poetic inspiration, or it might bind you to their service for 100 years. This Celtic vision offers a profoundly different philosophical approach to immortality. It is not a prize for moral perfection or spiritual mastery, nor is it a curse for a transgression. It is simply the default state of a neighboring reality. The tragedy of Oisin is not that he was unworthy of eternal life, but that he was a mortal who could not abide by the rules of an alien cosmology. His story, and others like it, serve as a warning about the cost of yearning for a world that is not our own and the heartbreak that comes from being untethered from the flow of time that binds a community and a culture together. The Celtic immortals remind us that eternity might be closer than we think, a parallel world of endless celebration visible from the corner of the eye, but to step into it is to leave everything we know and love behind forever. But if the Celtic otherworld represents an external paradise of eternal youth, our next legend turns the quest for immortality inward, into the secretive laboratories and coded manuscripts of the alchemists. Here, the pursuit was not about finding a magical land or a sacred object, but about achieving the ultimate act of creation, forging life itself. This brings us to one of the most bizarre and intellectually audacious concepts in the history of esoteric thought: the homunculus, an artificial humanoid believed to be crafted in a flask through alchemical art and imbued with a strange, supernatural existence. The most famous instructions for creating such a being come from the 16th century Swiss-German alchemist and physician Paracelsus, a revolutionary thinker who challenged the medical establishment of his day. In his work De Natura Rerum, he provides a startlingly specific, if grotesque, recipe. He described taking human sperm, sealing it in a sealed cucurbit, a gourd-shaped glass vessel, and burying it in horse manure for 40 days. During this time, the substance was to be magnetized, a process likely involving the application of certain minerals and perhaps even astrological alignments. After this period of putrefaction, the substance would begin to move and take on a semi-transparent, human-like form. The alchemist then had to nourish the tiny creature daily with a small amount of human blood for another 40 weeks, at which point it would develop into a fully formed, though miniature, human child, a homunculus, Latin for little man. This being was said to possess incredible knowledge from the moment of its birth, including an understanding of secret arts and the ability to perform tasks for its creator. Most importantly for our theme, these artificial beings were often attributed with an extended, if not immortal, lifespan, as they were products of art rather than nature, untainted by the original sin or the natural decay inherent in born humans. They represented a form of perfected life, created in a controlled environment without the usual vulnerabilities of the flesh. However, to view this solely as a literal, proto-scientific attempt to create a miniature servant is to miss its profound symbolic depth. The homunculus was a powerful metaphor for the entire alchemical process itself, known as the magnum opus or great work. The sealed vessel, or vas hermeticum, represented the sealed and purified mind of the alchemist. The base materials, sperm, blood, minerals, symbolized the raw, unrefined aspects of the practitioner's own soul, their passions, their intellect, their primal life force. The weeks of careful nourishment and magnetization represented the discipline of meditation, study, and spiritual exercise required to transform the self. The final creation of the homunculus, then, was not about building an external creature, but about giving birth to a new, perfected spiritual self within the alchemist, a kind of immortal, enlightened consciousness often called the corpus glorificationis. In this light, the homunculus legend is a direct parallel to the Buddhist pursuit of the arhat, or the Taoist refinement of the spirit. It was humanity's attempt to use knowledge, or gnosis, to cheat death not by extending the physical body indefinitely, but by transcending it entirely through the creation of a more perfect spiritual body that could survive the grave. The laboratory equipment was a physical anchor for an intensely spiritual practice. The homunculus was the tangible symbol of the alchemist's own potential immortality, a tiny, bottled-up version of their highest self. Yet, even in the 16th and 17th centuries, these ideas raised thorny ethical and theological questions that resonate eerily with modern debates about artificial intelligence and genetic engineering. If a human could create life, what was the nature of its soul? Was it a demonic entity, a soulless automaton, or a being with a spirit granted by God? Did the Creator have a moral responsibility for his creation? Writers and thinkers of the time grappled with these issues. The homunculus was often depicted as uncanny, unnatural, and ultimately dangerous, a theme later masterfully adopted by Mary Shelley in Frankenstein. The legend served as a cautionary tale about the limits of human knowledge and the hubris of playing God. It asked a question we are still struggling to answer today. Just because we can create life, does it mean we should? The homunculus, therefore, stands as a fascinating crossroads between science, spirituality, and ethics. A tiny figure in a glass vessel containing the immense human ambition to conquer death through the power of creation. Far to the north, in the vast frozen expanse of Siberia, a different kind of immortality was cultivated, one not of the body, but of the spirit's boundless journey. Here, amidst the tundra and the taiga, shamans served as the vital bridge between the human world and the animate, spirit-filled cosmos. Their version of eternal existence wasn't about halting death, but about mastering the art of moving between worlds, achieving a form of consciousness that could travel unfettered by the physical form, accessing realms where time itself held no sway. For these practitioners, immortality was a dynamic state of spiritual connection and influence, earned through ordeal and maintained through ritual. The path to becoming a shaman was often not chosen but imposed by the spirits themselves through a harrowing initiation known as the shamanic sickness. A prospective shaman would fall gravely ill, suffering vivid nightmares and visions in which their body was seemingly dismembered by spirits, their bones scraped clean, their organs replaced, their eyes ripped out so they could see the unseen. This brutal psychic dismantling was interpreted as the death of the old, mundane self and the forging of a new, resilient spiritual body capable of withstanding the rigors of spirit travel. Surviving this crisis was the first step toward immortality, as the individual was literally reassembled as a vessel for power, a being who had already symbolically died and been reborn into their role. Once initiated, the shaman's primary tool for transcending mortal limits was the ritualistic drumming and dancing that induced an ecstatic trance state. In this altered consciousness, their kachina, or free soul, would detach from their physical body and embark on voyages to the upper and lower worlds. The drum was not merely an instrument, it was the shaman's horse, its steady beat the hooves pounding against the earth as they rode into the spirit realms. In these non-ordinary realities, the linear flow of time we experience simply did not apply. A shaman might spend what felt like weeks negotiating with a spirit for the return of a patient's stolen soul, only to return to their body in the physical world to find that just minutes had passed. This ability to operate outside of time granted them a perspective on existence that was, in a very real sense, immortal. They could perceive the interconnectedness of all life across ages, consulting with ancient ancestral spirits and foreseeing potential futures. This profound connection to the eternal had a direct impact on their perceived physical lifespan and the well-being of their entire community. A powerful shaman was believed to continually replenish their life force through these spirit journeys, drawing power from the cosmic tree that connected all worlds or from their personal spirit helpers. Their vitality was not their own alone, it was a resource for the people. By successfully traveling to the land of the dead to retrieve a soul, they were literally cheating death for a community member. By negotiating with spirit masters of the game animals, they ensured the herd's rejuvenation and the tribe's continued sustenance for another year. In this way, the shaman's spiritual immortality translated into tangible longevity for all. They were the living conduit through which the eternal energy of the spirit world flowed into the mortal realm, healing, guiding, and sustaining. The ultimate testament to a shaman's achieved immortality was the belief surrounding their final physical death. It was said that when a great shaman died, their spirit did not travel the same path as ordinary souls. Instead of departing forever, their helping spirits would often take possession of their body, preventing normal decomposition. Some legends tell of a shaman's body being cut into pieces and distributed to other shamans, transferring their power and continuing their legacy. In other tales, the shaman's spirit would simply choose to remain near their people as a powerful ancestral guardian, a timeless presence watching over the land and their descendants. Their existence became a continuous loop between the worlds, a permanent part of the spiritual landscape they had spent their life navigating, achieving a form of eternity that was woven into the very fabric of their culture and the Siberian wilderness itself. While the shamans of Siberia achieved immortality through spiritual travel and the alchemists sought it through creation, the Yoruba people of West Africa and their descendants across the Americas envisioned a cosmos where immortality is the very fabric of divine existence. This brings us to the powerful and enduring Orishas, the divine forces of the Yoruba pantheon who are not merely immortal but are eternal manifestations of nature, human endeavor, and cosmic balance. These are not distant, aloof gods. They are vibrant, dynamic energies that actively mediate between humanity and the supreme, unknowable creator, Olodumare, offering a path to spiritual longevity and protection within the flow of an everlasting universe. The foundation of this belief system rests on the understanding that Olodumare is the source of all existence, a transcendent force so immense that it does not directly intervene in human affairs. Instead, the Orishas act as its emissaries and executives, each governing a specific aspect of the natural and spiritual world. They are immortal because they are fundamental principles given consciousness. They have always existed and always will, as essential as the ocean, the forest, or the forge. Their eternal nature is not a static state but a continuous engagement with creation, and through worship, humanity can tap into this timeless energy. Consider Eligua, the first and most crucial Orisha to be honored. He is the master of roads, doors, and opportunities, the divine trickster who holds the keys to fate. Without his permission and opening of the way, no prayer can reach the other Orishas, often depicted as a young child or an old man, embodying the beginning and end of all things. Eligua teaches that every journey, every life path is part of an eternal cycle. His immortality lies in the constant presence of choice and chance at every crossroads, a force that will exist as long as there are paths to take. Then there is Ogun, the fierce and honorable Orisha of iron, war, and technology. He is the patron of all who work with metal, blacksmiths, surgeons, soldiers, and engineers. Ogun represents the transformative power of technology and the relentless drive of human progress. His spirit is immortalized in every piece of forged steel, in every skyscraper that rises, and in every surgical procedure that saves a life. He is a timeless force of creation and destruction through industry, reminding us that while tools and societies evolve, the primal, driving spirit of innovation is eternal. Worshippers seek his protection from physical harm and his strength to overcome obstacles, aligning their mortal efforts with his everlasting power. In beautiful contrast, we find Yemoja, the mother of all Orishas and the queen of the oceans. She is the source of all life, the nurturer, and the embodiment of motherhood and fertility. Her domain is the vast, ancient sea from which all life originally emerged. She is immortal because water is eternal, constantly cycling from sea to cloud to rain and back again, sustaining all living things. She represents the timeless, cyclical nature of life itself, the ebb and flow of emotions, the breaking of waters in childbirth, and the deep, abiding love that connects generations. Her followers pray to her for healing, for protection of children and families, and for the emotional strength that flows as endlessly as the tides. Worship of the Orishas is a vibrant, living tradition that connects devotees directly to this eternal energy through prayer, music, dance, and offerings. But the concept of immortality extends beyond the divine into the very soul of the individual. Central to Yoruba cosmology is the belief in spiritual reincarnation, known as Atunwa. Unlike some Eastern concepts where the goal is to escape the cycle, here the cycle is a natural and ongoing process of growth. The individual's soul, or Ori, is believed to be immortal, having chosen its destiny before birth in agreement with Olajume. Upon physical death, the soul may return to the world of the living in a new body within the same lineage, to continue its journey toward fulfilling that destiny. This means that a venerable ancestor is not truly gone. Their essence, their Ori, lives on, potentially reborn in a new descendant. This creates a profound and tangible form of spiritual immortality where the family line is not just a biological chain but a continuous spiritual entity. The ancestors, the Egungun, are revered and consulted, their wisdom considered a living resource. Therefore, immortality within this system is multifaceted. The Orishas are eternal forces, and the human soul participates in that eternity through an endless cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth, all under the watchful eyes of the divine mediators who make the universe intelligible and vibrant. Imagine a form of immortality where you simply close your eyes to escape the troubles of your time, only to open them centuries later to a world utterly transformed. This is the captivating premise behind the legend of the Seven Sleepers, a tale so powerful it found a home in Christian, Islamic, and Persian traditions, making it one of history's most widespread stories of temporal transcendence. It's not about elixirs or magical artifacts. It's about faith so pure it literally allows its bearers to bypass the ravages of time, awakening as living relics in a future they could never have imagined. The most familiar version comes from early Christian lore, set in the city of Ephesus around the 3rd century. During the brutal persecution of Christians under the Roman Emperor Decius, 7 young men refused to renounce their faith. Facing certain death, they fled the city and hid in a small cave on Mount Anchilos. Exhausted and fearing for their lives, they fell into a deep, divinely orchestrated sleep. The authorities, discovering their hiding place, sealed the cave's entrance with heavy stones, believing they had entombed them alive, but this was not their end. According to the legend, they slept undisturbed, not for a night, but for nearly 300 years, their bodies preserved in a state of miraculous animation. They awoke during the reign of the Christian Emperor Theodosius II, a time when their faith was now the official religion of the empire. One of the youths, leaving the cave to sneak into the city for food, is bewildered to see crosses displayed on buildings and people freely speaking the name of Christ. The world they knew was gone. Their old coins from the era of Decius are rejected as ancient artifacts. The legend reaches its poignant climax when the bishop and the emperor themselves come to the cave to witness the miracle. After sharing their incredible story with the astonished onlookers, the 7 men peacefully lay down and finally died, their purpose fulfilled. They were seen as divine proof of the resurrection of the dead, a living affirmation for a church now grappling with complex theological debates. This powerful narrative was embraced and revered within Islam, where it is recounted in the 18th surah of the Quran, Al-Kahf, or the cave. While the details differ, the number of sleepers is left divinely unknown, and their lengthy slumber is explicitly stated to be a sign from God. The core themes resonate deeply. In the Islamic tradition, the story emphasizes God's absolute power to suspend natural law, the unwavering faith of the youths, and the ultimate reality of the Day of Judgment. They are known as the companions of the cave, and their long sleep is presented as a period of divine protection, a respite from the persecution of a disbelieving society. Their awakening serves as a stunning demonstration to the people of a later era that God's promise of resurrection is absolutely true. What makes this legend so universally compelling is its exploration of a unique form of immortality. This isn't an eternal, ageless existence, but a profound leap through time. The sleepers experience a form of suspended animation, a pause button pressed on their lives that allows them to bypass the entire intervening history. They achieve a kind of temporal immortality, becoming living bridges between two distant points in time. Their bodies are preserved, but it is their faith that is truly frozen in time, remaining perfectly intact and unchanged from the moment they entered the cave. When they awaken, they carry the pure, unadulterated conviction of the early faithful directly into a new age. The story powerfully plays on a very human anxiety about change and the passage of time. We all wonder what the world will be like in 100 or 300 years. The seven sleepers live that reality. Their confusion and disorientation upon awakening touch on a deep-seated fear of becoming obsolete, of being a stranger in your own land. Yet the legend ultimately offers immense comfort. It suggests that some core truths like faith, integrity, and the enduring human spirit are timeless. The world may change beyond recognition, empires may rise and fall, but these essential virtues remain the constant, unshakable bedrock of existence. The legend of the seven sleepers endures because it is, at its heart, a hopeful promise that what we hold most sacred can survive even the most profound upheavals, sleeping quietly through the ages, waiting for the right moment to awaken and inspire anew. Now we journey from the timeless slumber of the seven sleepers to a vision of immortality that is active, demanding, and written not in years but in blood. In the vibrant, often brutal cosmos of the Aztecs and Maya, eternity was not a static reward but a dynamic, precarious state of balance that required constant nourishment. For these Mesoamerican civilizations, the very existence of the universe depended on a sacred transaction, the offering of the most precious life force to sustain the gods, a practice through which mere humans could achieve a legendary form of immortality by becoming essential participants in the cosmic order. At the heart of this belief was the powerful legend of the five suns. The Aztecs believed the current world was the fifth iteration of creation, each previous world, or sun, having been destroyed by catastrophic events like jaguars, hurricanes, and rains of fire. The sun they lived under, the fifth sun, was called the sun of movement because, according to the myth, it would one day be destroyed by a great earthquake. This sun had been created at the ancient city of Teotihuacan when the humble and pustule-covered god Nanahuatzin courageously leapt into a divine bonfire, transforming into the sun. However, the newborn sun hung motionless in the sky. The other gods realized a terrible sacrifice was needed to set it in motion. They offered their own blood, and some versions say their very hearts, to fuel the sun's journey across the sky. This foundational myth established the fundamental principle of the cosmos. The sun, and by extension all of creation, required constant sacrificial nourishment, or tlaxcaltilistli in Nahuatl, meaning payment. Without it, the sun would stall, the world would plunge into darkness, and the fifth sun would meet its catastrophic end. This wasn't just a story, it was a dire cosmological directive. The sun was not a burning ball of gas but a divine being, Tanatia, who required a daily meal of Teotl, the divine, animating energy that flowed through all things, from the mightiest god to the smallest blade of grass. The most potent source of this energy was human blood, or chalchihuastli, meaning precious water. It was the ultimate life force, the literal liquid form of Teotl. Through ritual bloodletting or auto-sacrifice, and through the much more dramatic offering of human hearts in a ceremony called Ixiptla, the people, led by their rulers and priests, literally fed the sun. They were not merely worshippers, they were cosmic caterers, and the stakes could not have been higher. Every sunrise was a victory, proof that their offerings the previous day had been sufficient. This created a worldview of profound responsibility, where the survival of all creation was directly linked to human ritual action. For the rulers and elite warriors of these societies, this duty was also their path to immortality. A king was not just a political leader, he was the primary conduit between the human world and the divine. During grand ceremonies, a Tlatoni or Aztec emperor would publicly perform bloodletting, drawing spines through his tongue, ears, or penis to offer his own royal blood to the gods. This act demonstrated his ultimate commitment to his people's survival and solidified his divine right to rule, but the ultimate honor was reserved for the most courageous warriors. Dying in battle or being selected for ritual sacrifice was not a tragedy. It was the highest form of death. These individuals did not travel to the dark, dreary underworld of Mictlan like those who died of old age or sickness. Instead, they earned a glorious afterlife. A warrior who died in combat or a sacrifice victim who embodied a god, the Ixiptla, would embark on a sacred journey. They were believed to accompany the sun on its dangerous daily passage across the sky from east to west, fighting alongside it against the stars and moon, the forces of darkness that sought to extinguish it. After 4 years of this celestial battle, these heroic souls would be transformed. They would become huahuit, so beautiful hummingbirds or butterflies, and descend to earth to sip nectar from flowers in a joyful, eternal paradise. Their immortality was not one of rest, but of continued service and transformation, a perpetual existence as part of the sun's radiant entourage. The Maya held a parallel, deeply spiritual view centered on the concept of Kaya, a sacred life force similar to Teotl. Their rulers, or Kayuhul Ajor, holy lords, proved their divine connection through spectacular acts of bloodletting. In elaborate rituals depicted on stone stelae, Maya queens would draw thorn-studded ropes through their tongues, and kings would pierce their own penises, spilling copious amounts of blood onto paper strips that were then burned in sacred braziers. The rising smoke from this burning blood was seen as a nourishing vapor, a direct conduit that opened a portal to the otherworld, allowing visions of ancestors and deities to appear and communicate. Through this pain, the ruler demonstrated his or her power to commune with the gods and channel their energy for the benefit of the kingdom, ensuring fertility for the crops and victory in war. Their names and deeds were carved in stone not just for vanity, but to create an eternal record of these sacred transactions, ensuring their legacy and their spiritual presence would endure long after their physical bodies were gone. They achieved immortality not by avoiding death, but by using their life and their very blood as the ultimate offering to fuel the endless sacred cycles of time itself. Shifting from the cosmic struggles of Mesoamerican deities to the hidden currents of European folklore, we encounter a being whose immortality is bound to the moon, water, and the very foundations of noble lineage. This is the captivating and tragic legend of Melusine, a feminine spirit whose story weaves together themes of love, secrecy, and the high cost of a life extended beyond natural limits. Unlike the gods who demanded blood sacrifice, Melusine's tale is intimate, a domestic drama where the supernatural intrudes upon the courtly world, offering immense power alongside a terrible, inescapable paradox. Melusine is a type of being known as a fae or fairy from French mythology, often specifically linked to the fresh waters of springs, rivers, and wells. Her most famous story, immortalized in a 14th century romance by Jean Duras, begins with a curse. She and her sisters were punished by their fairy mother for locking their father inside a mountain. The punishment was severe. Each Saturday, Melusine was transformed from her beautiful human form into a creature from the waist down, often described as a gigantic serpent or, more poetically, a fish, a dual-natured being, both woman and water dragon. This weekly transformation was her secret, the price of her immortal and powerful existence. She could live an extended, vibrant life, but only if this one condition of her curse remained hidden from mortal eyes. Her path crosses with a mortal nobleman, Raymond of Poitou, who encounters her by a forest spring. Enchanted by her beauty, he proposes marriage, Melusine agrees, but she sets one non-negotiable term. He must grant her absolute privacy every Saturday, never attempting to see her or discover what she does on that day. Raymond eagerly agrees, and with Melusine as his wife, his fortunes skyrocket. She uses her supernatural knowledge and power to help him acquire vast lands and build magnificent fortresses and churches with astonishing speed. She becomes the literal architect of his dynasty, founding the powerful Lusignan family, which would later become kings of Cyprus and Jerusalem. Her weekly seclusion becomes the wellspring of their weekly prosperity. Her curse is the source of their blessing. She bears him many sons, though each inherits a small, strange physical flaw: a lion's paw, a boar's tusk, a single giant eye, a subtle hint of their mother's otherworldly and monstrous heritage. For years, the arrangement holds, but as their power grows, so does courtly gossip. Raymond's kin, envious of his success, poison his mind with suspicions, whispering that his wife's Saturday absences must mean she is meeting a lover. Torn between love and a mortal man's pride, Raymond finally breaks his vow. One Saturday, he drills a hole in the door of her secluded chamber or peers through a window crack. He witnesses the terrifying and awe-inspiring truth. His wife is partially a monstrous serpent immersed in her bath. He does not cry out, but the secret is broken. Later, when one of their sons commits a grievous act, Raymond loses his temper and publicly denounces Melusine as a serpent and a deceitful fairy. The taboo has been violated. With a cry of profound sorrow, Melusine's curse is activated. She transforms into her serpentine form one final time, circling the castle of Lusignan 3 times with a mournful wail before flying away, destined to return only as a harbinger of death or misfortune for the lords of the castle, forever linking her fate to the lineage she helped create. Melusine's immortality is profoundly complex. She is not invulnerable, she is bound by a magical contract. Her extended existence and power are conditional on the preservation of her secret. The moment her true, hybrid nature is exposed by a mortal's distrust, her time in the human world is over. She represents the blessing and curse of a supernatural lifespan. She can bestow wealth and build empires, but she can never fully belong. She is eternally the outsider, the other, whose power is both desired and feared, and whose difference must ultimately be rejected by the very society that benefits from her. Her weekly transformation is not just a physical affliction. It is a symbol of the dual identity she must constantly manage, a precarious balance between her mortal loves and her immortal reality. Beyond the enchanting fairy tale, anthropologists and historians see in Melusine a profound echo of much older cultural memories. Her strong association with building, laying the foundations of castles, links her to a whole class of European folk legends about foundation sacrifices. In these tales, a spirit or being must be captured and buried within the foundations of a new structure to ensure its stability, much like Melusine's spirit was symbolically entombed within the walls of Lusignan's legacy. More significantly, her story may be a mythological remnant of matrilineal inheritance patterns that were suppressed by patriarchal societies. Melusine is the source of the family's power, land, and name itself. The lineage flows through her. Her demand for secrecy can be interpreted as a metaphor for the gradual erasure of the mother's line and her central role in governance and property rights. The husband's act of spying and his subsequent accusation represent the patriarchal takeover, the assertion of control over the mysterious and powerful feminine source of his own authority. Her eventual banishment symbolizes the suppression of that ancient power, yet her enduring legend ensures she is never truly forgotten, forever haunting the patriarchy she was forced to build. Now we turn to one of the oldest and most philosophically profound visions of immortality, one that resides not in a single being but in a divine council of eternal principles. In the ancient Persian religion of Zoroastrianism, founded by the prophet Zarathustra over 3,000 years ago, the supreme creator god Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, does not act alone. His divine will is expressed through a sacred heptad, 7 radiant beings known as the Aimsha Spenters, which translates to holy immortals or bounteous immortals. These are not gods in a traditional polytheistic sense, nor are they angels in a later Abrahamic context. They are fundamental aspects of Ahura Mazda's own divine nature, personified as distinct, eternal entities that both embody and govern the core components of a perfected creation. Their immortality is not a reward, it is their very essence, representing a cosmic and philosophical form of existence that is forever aligned with truth, order, and goodness. First among these radiant beings is Spenta, the Holy Spirit or Bounteous Spirit. This is the very creative energy of Ahura Mazda himself, the force of pure goodness and growth that actively opposes the destructive spirit Angra Mainyu. Spenta represents the fundamental choice for life, light, and construction in the universe. Following this creative impulse comes the rest of the divine heptad, each presiding over a specific facet of the good creation. Vohumana is the good mind or good purpose. This immortal is the embodiment of divine wisdom and the right way of thinking. It is through Vohumana that Ahura Mazda is said to have revealed the truth to Zarathustra, making this entity the divine mediator of insight and the patron of those who work with animals, particularly the sacred cow. Then we have Ashavahishta, which means best truth or highest order. This is perhaps the most central concept in all of Zoroastrianism. Asha is the cosmic law of truth, righteousness, and the inherent order of the universe. It is the divine blueprint against which all thoughts, words, and deeds are measured. Ashavahishta is the enemy of chaos and falsehood, and its domain includes the sacred fire, which symbolizes the light of truth that burns away deception. Next is Kshathra Varya, desirable dominion. This immortal represents the divine authority and power to rule justly, and it presides over the sky and metals. It is the concept of a perfect kingdom, a society structured in harmony with Asha, where each person can flourish under righteous leadership. It is the power to create a world that reflects the goodness of Ahura Mazda. Completing the first 6 is a pair of entities that represent the ideals of devotion and wholeness. Spenta Amati is holy devotion or benevolent piety. She embodies the loving reverence for creation, the patient dedication to the divine, and the quiet strength of faith. She is associated with the earth, and it is through her that the land becomes fertile and nurturing. Horvatat is wholeness or health, representing perfection, integrity, and complete well-being. She is the state of being untouched by the corruption of the destructive spirit, our ideal of flawless existence. Her counterpart is Amritat, immortality. While all the Aimsha Spenters are immortal, Amritat is the very personification of this concept, the divine force of endless life and vitality, closely linked to plants and the waters of life. The brilliance of this system is how it connects the cosmic to the everyday. Each Aimsha Spenter is not only a divine principle, but also the guardian of a specific part of the physical creation. Vohumana guards the animal kingdom, Asha the fire, Kshathra the sky and metals, Amati the earth, Horvatat the waters, and Amritat the plant life. This creates a sacred ecology where every element of the natural world is infused with divine presence and purpose. Humanity's role, represented by the first Aimsha Spenta, Spenta, is to actively choose to align with these holy immortals through good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. By doing so, we become co-workers with Ahura Mazda in the great cosmic struggle against the lie, drudge, and its champion, Angra Mainyu. We don't just worship these forces, we partner with them. To think with Vohumana is to nurture the good mind within ourselves. To act with Ashavahishta is to bring more truth into the world. To build a just society is to make Kshathra Varya manifest on earth. This represents a truly unique form of immortality. The ancient spenters themselves are eternal, unchanging pillars of the divine reality. But for humans, immortality is achieved by consciously integrating these principles into our own lives, thereby connecting our mortal existence to their eternal source. Our legacy is not measured in years lived, but in how much we have embodied Ashar, how much we have advanced Kshatra, how much we have nurtured life through Amritat. In this worldview, to live forever is to have your actions, your thoughts, and your spirit forever aligned with the fundamental, undying forces of goodness, truth, and creation that structure the universe itself. The holy immortals offer a path to eternity not through a potion or a prayer, but through a life of purposeful alignment with the very architecture of the divine. But across the vast tapestry of immortal legends we've explored, from gods bound by apples to alchemists crafting miniature humans, there is one figure who stands apart precisely because he has no definitive story at all. He is a whisper in the archive, a flicker in the corner of a painted canvas, a face that refuses to age across centuries of documentation. This is the legend of the unknown immortal, a man who appears startlingly identical in medieval manuscripts, Renaissance portraits, and even 19th century photographs, sparking a mystery that suggests everlasting life might not be flaunted in grand palaces, but hidden in the bustling crowds of history itself. One of the most compelling threads of this legend begins with a series of historical curiosities. A researcher might be poring over a 15th century Italian fresco and note the distinct, sharp features of a man in the crowd scene, his expression calm and observant. Years later, the same researcher might be examining a Dutch guild painting from the 1600s and experience a jolt of recognition. There, amidst the burghers and merchants, is the same man, seemingly not a day older. The phenomenon repeats. He is spotted in the background of a royal court painting in 18th century France, his attire updated to the fashion of the era, but his face, his posture, hauntingly familiar. The legend truly vaults into the modern era with the advent of photography. A seemingly ordinary tintype from the American Civil War era shows a group of Union soldiers. One face in the second row, clear and unmistakable, appears to be the very same individual. The sheer chronological spread of these alleged sightings, spanning over 400 years, defies any rational explanation and ignites the imagination. This has, of course, spawned a whirlwind of theories attempting to pin a name or a concept to this enigmatic figure. The most popular candidate is the infamous Count of St. Germain, an 18th century European courtier, adventurer, and amateur alchemist who was renowned for his apparent agelessness and his cryptic hints at having lived for centuries. He spoke of personal conversations with ancient Romans and seemed to possess knowledge far beyond his time. While a historical St. Germain did exist, the myths that swallowed him whole easily account for his face being superimposed onto this wider legend, making him the default identity for any alleged immortal sighting in that period. Other theories are far more speculative. Could he be a time traveler, a tourist from a future where moving through history is as simple as we board a flight, casually appearing to observe key moments like a visitor at a museum? Or perhaps he is a symbolic representation, an archetype of the eternal witness that the human mind is primed to recognize, a psychological glitch where we project a pattern of familiarity onto similar but unrelated faces across art history. Yet the most captivating aspect of this legend is not who he might be, but what his persistent presence suggests. Unlike Gilgamesh, who raged against death, or the alchemists who toiled in secret labs to overcome it, this figure presents a different model of immortality altogether. He is not a king, a god, or a wizard. He is an extra. He is the man in the background, the face in the crowd. His eternal life is not spent ruling or questing, but seemingly in observing, a silent spectator to the entire human parade. This makes the legend so deeply personal and unsettling. It implies that immortality might not be a dramatic affair of epic battles and divine curses. It might be a quiet, endless walk through time, a perpetual state of being present while everyone else is merely passing through. He is the ultimate ghost, not haunting a single house but all of history itself. This is why the myth of the unknown immortal resonates so powerfully in our digital age. In an era of facial recognition software and AI that can scan millions of images in seconds, the idea that we could one day algorithmically uncover such a person feels tantalizingly possible. The legend taps into a modern anxiety and fascination with anonymity and surveillance. The fear that we are all being watched, and the eerie possibility that someone watching might have been doing so for a very, very long time. He represents the mystery that still lurks within our meticulously catalogued past, a reminder that for all our recorded history, there are secrets that remain hidden in plain sight, waiting for a keen eye to connect the dots across the centuries. He is not just a story, he is an invitation to look closer, to question the familiar, and to wonder if the man you just passed on the street has walked the same cobblestones in a different century, wearing a different hat but with the very same knowing smile. From the quiet observation of the unknown immortal, we now turn to a figure whose presence is announced with deafening force and brilliant light. In the rich spiritual landscape of the Yoruba people, immortality is not always a quiet affair. Sometimes it arrives with the earth-shattering crack of thunder. This brings us to the powerful and complex legend of Sango, the fourth king of the ancient Oyo Empire, a historical ruler whose life, death, and subsequent deification transformed him into the formidable Orisha of thunder, lightning, and fire, an immortal force of divine justice who is still actively worshipped by millions today. Sango's story begins not as a myth, but in the very real history of the Oyo Empire, one of the most powerful West African states from the 14th to the 19th centuries. He was a formidable Alofin, or king, known for his military prowess, his charismatic but often ruthless leadership, and his association with the raw, terrifying power of thunder and lightning. Historical accounts suggest he was a powerful and ambitious ruler, but his reign was also marked by controversy and conflict. According to the most common tradition, Sango's downfall came from his own power. In a tragic turn of events, he inadvertently caused a great catastrophe, using a powerful magic given to him by his maternal grandfather to summon lightning. The lightning struck his own palace, killing several of his wives and children. Horrified and consumed by grief and shame over this terrible mistake, his subjects' support crumbling around him, Sango chose to abdicate his throne. He left the city of Oyo and, in a place called Koso, committed suicide by hanging himself. But this was not the end of his story. It was merely the beginning of his transformation. His followers, who had revered him in life, refused to believe their mighty king had died in such a manner. They declared that he had not truly died, but had instead ascended directly into the heavens, transforming into an Orisha. The word Koso itself became part of his praise name, Oba Koso, the king did not hang. This powerful denial of his mortal death was the crucial act of deification, a collective belief so strong it literally willed him into immortality. He shed his mortal coil and became a permanent part of the spiritual firmament, a being of pure energy and sound. In his new divine form, Sango is the embodiment of the terrifying, unpredictable, and purifying power of a thunderstorm. He is often depicted wielding a double-headed axe, the Osh, which represents the swift, sharp strike of lightning and his unwavering authority. His colors are red and white, symbolizing both the fire of lightning and the purity of its cleansing power. His worship is anything but sedate. Followers of Sango, known as Sangoists, celebrate him with dynamic, energetic rituals filled with intense drumming, passionate dancing, and displays of incredible spiritual strength. The Bata drums speak his language, and his devotees, both male and female, are known for their ability to perform miraculous feats, such as carrying lit pots of fire on their heads or breathing flames, demonstrating their connection to his potent energy. Sango is a god of masculine virility, of dance, and of drumming, but above all, he is the ultimate enforcer of justice. He strikes down liars, oath-breakers, and evildoers with his lightning, but he also fiercely protects his loyal followers, granting them power, courage, and success in their endeavors. To have Sango's ass or divine authority is to carry a spark of his immortal, commanding presence within you. What makes Sango's immortality so compelling is its duality. He is both a deified human and a primordial force of nature. He is a historical king remembered and a god who is actively felt every time a storm gathers. This bridges a gap that many other immortal legends cannot. He has a documented earthly history and an ongoing divine present. He is not a distant, omnipotent god, but a deified ancestor who understands human ambition, error, and passion because he lived it. His story carries the weight of human tragedy, his fatal error and subsequent shame, which makes his ultimate triumph and transformation all the more powerful. He achieved immortality not through a potion or a quest, but through the unwavering faith of his people and the sheer, undeniable force of his own will and character. A force so potent it could not be contained by mortality and instead exploded into a permanent, thunderous reality. Across cultures and throughout time, we see a powerful recurring theme emerge: the need for a protection so absolute and enduring that it must be entrusted to those who never sleep, never age, and never abandon their post. This is the domain of the Eternal Guardian, an immortal being whose solemn duty is to stand watch over something of immeasurable value, long after the civilization that created it has turned to dust. These legends aren't just about security, they are profound expressions of our deepest anxieties about legacy, our fear of what might be lost to time or greed, and our hope that some things are so precious they deserve a sentinel for the ages. Perhaps the most breathtaking and literal example is found in the silent, underground army surrounding the tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. The Terracotta Army is not merely a collection of sculptures, it is a monument to one man's terrifying obsession with controlling his own destiny, even in death. Thousands of life-sized, uniquely detailed soldiers, charioteers, and archers were meticulously crafted and arranged in battle formation, their terracotta faces turned forever eastward toward the ancient states Qin had conquered. Their purpose was explicit: to guard the emperor's sprawling necropolis in the afterlife and to protect his soul for all eternity. These weren't symbolic tokens. In the beliefs of the time, these figures would be animated in the next world, becoming an immortal, unstoppable military force loyal only to him. It represents the ultimate attempt to extend imperial power beyond the grave, to ensure that the authority forged in life would remain unchallenged for all time, guarded by a faithful army that would never know decay. On the other side of the world, another legendary treasure sparked tales of guardians just as formidable. The fabled mines of King Solomon, a source of unimaginable wealth and a cornerstone of both historical speculation and adventure fiction, are almost always described as being protected by something otherworldly. In some local African traditions, the ancient mines were not merely hidden, but were cursed or watched over by the spirits of long-dead workers or powerful tribal ancestors. European explorers and writers later amplified these tales, weaving stories of supernatural curses, monstrous serpents, or intricate and deadly traps that defied the ages. These narratives served a dual purpose. They explained why such incredible riches remained undiscovered and untaken, and they acted as a moral caution. They suggest that certain knowledge, certain power, is not meant for mortal hands, and that the earth itself, or the spirits within it, will rise up to eternally guard such secrets from those who are not worthy. Shifting from earthly treasures to the promise of a divine reward, Norse mythology presents us with the most honored and eager guardians of all, the Einherjar. These were the souls of the greatest warriors who had died bravely in battle, chosen by the Valkyries to be brought to Odin's magnificent hall, Valhalla. But this was not a passive eternity of feasting and drinking mead. Their eternal vigil was one of constant, joyous preparation. Each day, these immortal warriors would arm themselves and march out into the vast fields of Asgard to battle one another, honing their skills to a razor's edge in a friendly yet fierce competition. Each evening, their wounds would be miraculously healed, and they would return to the great hall to feast on the boar Sihrimnir and drink endless mead, their camaraderie restored. Their eternal duty was to stay battle-ready for the final, cataclysmic conflict, Ragnarök. They are the ultimate reserve army, guarding not a place or a thing, but the very hope of the gods themselves. Their immortality is a purpose, a perpetual state of vigilance and training, ensuring that when the twilight of the gods arrives, the forces of order will have the finest army that ever lived or ever died, standing ready for one last glorious stand. What unites these vastly different legends, the silent terracotta soldiers, the cursed mine spirits, and the feasting warriors of Valhalla, is a profound human impulse. We are a species deeply concerned with preservation. We build monuments, amass knowledge, and accumulate treasures, and we are haunted by the thought of it all being lost, defiled, or forgotten. The Eternal Guardian is the answer to that deep-seated fear. It is the fantasy of creating a protector immune to the ravages of time, corruption, and apathy. These stories allow us to project our values, loyalty, duty, honor, and the sanctity of certain secrets into the infinite future. They assure us that what we hold most sacred will be defended forever, that our greatest kings will never be without their honor guard, our greatest secrets will never be plundered, and our greatest heroes will never truly be gone, but will remain forever on watch, eternal sentinels against the endless night. From the silent stone soldiers of China to the raucous hall of Valhalla, the desire for a guardian to defy time is universal. But what if the goal wasn't to guard a single treasure or king, but to win the ultimate prize for all of humanity? This brings us to one of the most heroic and tragically relatable figures in global mythology, the Polynesian demigod Moi. Unlike gods who are born immortal or alchemists who seek a personal elixir, Moi's quest was one of sheer, audacious benevolence. He sought to uplift the entire human condition, and his story, particularly his final, fatal attempt to conquer death, is a breathtakingly vivid explanation for why we must all grow old and die. Moi is not a distant, omnipotent deity. He is a trickster hero, a figure of immense power who is also profoundly human in his cleverness, his ambition, and ultimately his failure. His earlier exploits, celebrated across Polynesia from Hawaii to Aotearoa, New Zealand, read like a resume of a cosmic social worker. He wasn't just showing off, he was improving life for his people. He felt the days were too short for them to accomplish their work, so he journeyed to the edge of the world and, using a jawbone as a weapon, beat the sun into submission, forcing it to slow its journey across the sky and give humanity longer daylight hours. He saw that his people needed more land, so he went fishing with his magical fishhook Manaiakalani, and with immense effort hauled the North Island of New Zealand, Te Ika e Moi, or the Fish of Moi, up from the depths of the ocean. He even discovered the secret of fire by tricking the mudhens into revealing it, stealing it for human use. Each feat was a gift, a bending of the natural world to ease mortal suffering. Emboldened by these successes, Moi turned his attention to the greatest source of suffering of all, mortality itself. He noticed the sadness that descended when people grew old, weak, and passed away. He saw his own parents aging and became determined to defeat death, to win eternal life for all humankind. To do this, he knew he would have to confront the ultimate authority, Hain Nui Te Po, the goddess of night, death, and the underworld. She was a terrifying and powerful figure, often described as having eyes of stone and a body lined with sharp, obsidian teeth. Moi devised a daring and deeply symbolic plan. He learned from his ancestors that all human life enters the world through the gateway of birth. He reasoned that to reverse death, he must enter the source of life, but in reverse. His plan was to crawl through the sleeping goddess's body while she was unconscious, entering through her vagina and exiting through her mouth, thereby conquering death from the inside and stealing immortality for everyone. He gathered his companions, a group of small birds, and gave them a crucial instruction. They must maintain absolute silence during his entire journey inside the goddess. If they could do this, he would succeed, but if they laughed or made a sound and woke Hein Nui Ti Po, the attempt would end in catastrophe. The birds, perhaps too young to understand the gravity of the moment, agreed. As Moi began his impossible journey, shrinking himself to begin his crawl into the goddess, the sight of the mighty demigod disappearing feet first into the sleeping giantess struck the birds as absurdly funny. One of them, the Piwakawaka or fantail, could contain its laughter no longer. It let out a sharp, chirping giggle. The sound instantly woke Hein Nui Ti Po. Realizing what was happening, she clenched her powerful obsidian teeth, crushing Moi as he was halfway inside her. The demigod who had slowed the sun and fished up islands was killed, and his grand mission to conquer death died with him. This devastating failure is one of the most poignant etiological myths, a story explaining why things are the way they are ever conceived. It doesn't offer a complex theological reason for mortality. It offers a heartbreakingly simple one because a small bird laughed at the wrong moment. But this surface explanation holds a much deeper, more profound truth. The legend acknowledges that the attempt to overcome our limitations is a noble and heroic impulse, a defining trait of humanity. Moi's ambition is celebrated, yet it also serves as a powerful warning about the dangers of overreach or hubris. Death, in the form of Hein Nui Ti Po, is not an enemy to be tricked or defeated through sheer force of will. She is a fundamental, sacred part of the natural order. Moi's attempt to reverse the cycle of life and death was a violation of that order, an affront to the goddess's domain, and it resulted in his own demise, cementing mortality as the permanent fate for all humans. The story is also a masterpiece of metaphorical wisdom. The journey through the goddess's body represents the cycle of life itself, but in a corrupted, unnatural direction. Life enters the world through birth. It is not meant to be re-entered. The laughter of the fantail represents the unpredictable, chaotic nature of fate itself. The idea that even the most carefully laid plans of a hero can be undone by a moment of random chance or human frailty. In many traditions, the fantail is now seen as a harbinger of death or bad news, a living reminder of that fatal mistake. Moi's legend doesn't just explain why we die, it teaches us to value life precisely because it is finite. His failure granted us our humanity with all its beauty, its struggle, and its inevitable end. We are not immortal because a hero tried and failed, and in that failure, he gave us the most valuable gift of all, the urgency to live our mortal lives with courage, love, and purpose, making every sunrise he won for us truly count. Yet another form of immortality emerges from the fevered imagination of a besieged medieval Europe, born not from spiritual quests but from desperate geopolitical hope. This is the magnificent and enduring legend of Prester John, a mythical Christian king said to rule a vast utopian empire in the mysterious East, a land brimming with unimaginable wonders and whose very ruler was believed to be eternally sustained by God's grace. For centuries, this phantom monarch captivated popes, emperors, and explorers, representing the ultimate fantasy, a powerful, pious, and immortal ally in a world that felt increasingly dangerous and divided. The legend first burst onto the European stage in the 12th century, a period defined by the Crusades. In 1165, a mysterious letter, purportedly from Prester John himself, began circulating among the courts of Europe. Addressed to the Byzantine Emperor Manuel Komnenos, it described a kingdom of staggering splendor and strangeness. Prester John claimed to be a direct descendant of the biblical Magi, ruling over 72 other kings from a palace made of crystal and gold. His domain was a paradise on earth containing the fountain of youth itself, which granted extraordinary longevity to his subjects. It was a land free from greed, lies, and poverty, where peace and justice prevailed under his divinely ordained everlasting rule. The letter spoke of rivers flowing with precious gems, mountains of silver, and mythical creatures like phoenixes and griffons. Most importantly, Prester John declared his intention to march west, defeat the Muslim powers, and reclaim Jerusalem for Christendom. For European rulers locked in a costly holy war, this was electrifying news. Here was the promise of a lost army of faithful brethren, led by an ageless, all-powerful king, arriving as a deus ex machina to turn the tide. Over the following centuries, the location of this mythical kingdom proved frustratingly elusive, and its description shifted with the maps of the time. Initially, Prester John's realm was placed squarely in Asia, somewhere beyond the lands controlled by the Saracens and the Mongols. As European knowledge of Asia grew through the travels of Marco Polo and others without any sign of this Christian utopia, the legend simply migrated. By the 14th century, the focus had moved to Africa, specifically to the powerful and very real Christian kingdom of Ethiopia. Here, the legend found a foothold in reality. Ethiopia was one of the world's oldest Christian nations, isolated from Europe by vast deserts and powerful Muslim states, which made it a perfect candidate for a hidden, mythical kingdom. Tales of a powerful African priest king, the Negus, who ruled from a mountainous fortress, merged seamlessly with the Prester John mythos. Embassies were sent, and for a time, European explorers and diplomats were utterly convinced they had found the fabled ruler, or at least his direct descendant. The allure of Prester John's kingdom was deeply tied to its promise of physical immortality. Central to the lore was the description of a miraculous fountain of youth, a concept that fused Christian symbolism with ancient pagan legends of restorative waters. In this paradise, aging was not a fearsome decline but a gentle, managed process, halted by the divine authority of its priest-king. Other marvels included the Castle of the Magnet, a fortress built from lodestone that could pull the nails from approaching ships, and the Grape of God, a single colossal fruit that could feed 100 men. These weren't just random wonders, they were symbols of a world where the laws of nature were suspended by divine favor, where the faithful could live in a state of perpetual health and abundance under the benevolent, unending reign of their king. Ultimately, the legend of Prester John was far more than a fantastical travelogue. It was a powerful psychological and political projection. For a fractured Christendom, it represented a deep-seated yearning for validation and reinforcement. It was the hope that they were not alone in the world, that a stronger, purer, and eternal form of Christianity was thriving elsewhere, guaranteeing their ultimate victory. The immortality of Prester John himself was the key to this fantasy. An undying king meant an undying kingdom, a permanent bastion of faith that could never be corrupted or defeated by time or its enemies. The legend persisted for so long because it was infinitely adaptable, a blank space on the map that could be filled with all of Europe's hopes, fears, and desires. Even as the age of exploration eventually erased the mythical kingdom from the map, the spirit of Prester John endured a testament to humanity's endless capacity to dream of a perfect, protected, and everlasting place, especially when the real world feels most uncertain and mortal. Amidst the thunderous quests for eternal life and the silent watch of immortal guardians, a radically different path to the ultimate state of being emerged in ancient India. This is not a path of conquest or consumption, but of ultimate relinquishment. In the Jain tradition, immortality is not about extending existence within the physical universe. It is about achieving a state of being so pure, so free from all karmic matter, that the soul escapes the cycle of rebirth entirely. This is the liberated state of the Siddhas, and the most exalted beings to have walked this path are the Tirthankaras, the ford makers who chart the course across the ocean of rebirth for all other souls. The entire Jain cosmology is built upon a dualistic reality. There is the physical, material universe, Ajiva, which is governed by time and decay, and then there is the infinite, eternal soul, or Jiva, which is pure consciousness, perfect knowledge, and boundless bliss. The problem, according to Jainism, is that these two have become hopelessly entangled. Through actions driven by attachment, aversion, and ignorance, the soul accumulates a sticky, subtle substance known as karma. This is not simply cause and effect in an abstract sense. It is viewed as actual particles of matter that bind to the soul, weighing it down and forcing it to take on successive physical forms in an endless cycle of birth, suffering, death, and rebirth known as samsara. In this view, our mortal life in a physical body is not a gift to be extended, but a prison sentence to be completed. The ultimate goal, therefore, is not to live forever, but to stop living to achieve moksha, liberation from this cycle. The beings who have fully accomplished this are the siddhas. A siddha is a soul that has burned away all accumulated karma through intense spiritual discipline and has ascended to the apex of the universe, to the siddhashila, a realm of pure spiritual existence. Here, the soul exists in its true, innate nature, infinite knowledge, infinite perception, infinite power, and infinite bliss. It is a state of perfect, isolated consciousness, forever free from the suffering and limitations of any physical form. This is the Jain conception of immortality, not an endless duration in time, but an eternal existence outside of it. The path to becoming a siddha is phenomenally difficult, requiring lifetimes of effort. The most revered guides on this path are the Tirthankaras. While there are countless siddhas, a Tirthankara is a rare soul who not only achieves liberation but also, in their final lifetime, becomes a spiritual teacher, establishing a ford or a crossing for others to follow. The most recent and historical Tirthankara was Mahavira, a contemporary of the Buddha in the 6th century BCE. His life story is a template for the ultimate ascetic. Born a prince, he renounced his worldly life at the age of 30 to pursue spiritual awakening. For the next 12.5 years, he practiced unimaginable austerities. He abandoned all possessions, including his clothes, becoming a nude wanderer. He embraced extreme non-violence, ahimsa, carefully sweeping the ground before he walked to avoid crushing insects and filtering his water to avoid consuming any microscopic life forms. He endured harsh weather, meditated in the blazing sun, and fasted for long periods, all to burn off the karmic matter clinging to his soul and to break the attachments of his mind. His enlightenment, or Kevala Jnana, was the culmination of this process. It was the moment the last vestiges of karma were destroyed and he attained omniscience, a complete and simultaneous knowledge of all things in the universe, past, present, and future. For the next 30 years, he taught the principles of right faith, right knowledge, and right conduct, forming the fourfold order of monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen. At the end of his life, his physical body died, and his soul, now utterly weightless and free, ascended to the siddhashila to remain in blissful isolation for all eternity. His physical death was not a tragedy but a triumph, the final release. What makes the Jain path so philosophically profound is its redefinition of what it means to be eternal. The immortality of the siddhas is one of quality, not quantity. It is the antithesis of the wandering Jew's cursed longevity or the vampire's predatory half-life. The siddha does not witness time, it transcends it. It does not interact with the world, it exists in a state of perfect, self-contained fulfillment. This is achieved not by adding something, an elixir, a blessing, a magical object, but by subtracting everything that is not the soul, all desire, all attachment, all karma, and ultimately the physical body itself. The Tirthankaras, through their extreme compassion and teaching, show that this ultimate, silent, and solitary immortality is the birthright of every single soul, a state of perfection waiting to be uncovered once the final, karmic dust of countless lifetimes is finally swept away. While the Jain Siddhas sought liberation through extreme austerity and the subtraction of all worldly attachment, a starkly different path to an extended existence was imagined in the shadowy corners of European folklore. Here, immortality was not a solitary ascent to bliss but a communal, clandestine, and deeply transgressive act, a secret society of women who allegedly cheated time by stepping outside the bounds of both the church and natural law. This is the chilling legend of the witch's eternal Sabbath, a narrative woven from fear, misogyny, and a twisted fascination with those who dared to operate beyond the sanctioned cycles of life and death. At the heart of these tales was the concept of the diabolical pact. It was believed that a woman, often one living on the margins of society, a midwife, a healer, an unmarried elder, would renounce her Christian faith and pledge her soul to the devil or a lesser demon in exchange for worldly power. A central and often overlooked clause in this infernal contract was the promise of an extended, vibrant life. The witch would not necessarily live forever in the manner of a god, but she would be granted years far beyond her natural span, free from the common ailments and decay that afflicted the pious. Her vitality was a direct subsidy from the underworld, a payment for her service and her corruption. This immediately inverted the religious logic of the era. Where a saint might be granted a holy longevity through divine grace, the witch achieved the same through a blasphemous bargain, making her extended life a perversion of a sacred gift. The primary mechanism for accessing this otherworldly state was the legendary witch's Sabbath, a nocturnal gathering that was as much a supernatural phenomenon as a social one. Witches were said to anoint their bodies with a magical flying ointment, a gruesome paste concocted from hallucinogenic plants like belladonna and henbane, and often described as containing far more horrific ingredients like the fat of unbaptized babies. Smearing this ointment on their skin, often using a broomstick or a pole as an applicator, would launch them into a trance state. In this altered consciousness, their spirits would feel as though they were flying vast distances to a secret meeting place, a mountain peak like the Brocken in Germany, a remote forest clearing, or a crossroads. The key to the Sabbath's eternal nature, however, lay in its relationship with time. Folklore consistently held that time in the supernatural realm moved at a different pace. A witch might believe she had spent a night in revelry, learning dark arts and consorting with the devil, only to return home as the sun was rising and discover that mere minutes had passed in the real world. This time dilation meant she was, in effect, stealing extra hours of experience from the fabric of reality itself, living a hidden, second life that accumulated outside her mortal span. The gatherings themselves were described in trial records and pamphlets as grotesque inversions of the Catholic Mass. The devil, often appearing as a grotesque man-goat figure, would preside over the proceedings. Witches would pledge their allegiance to him, often by kissing his posterior, and would engage in a frantic, backwards dance to dissonant music. They would feast on foul, illusory foods, roasted children, saltless bread, and engage in orgiastic rites. For the women accused of witchcraft, these stories were a horrific fantasy imposed upon them by their persecutors. But for the society that believed them, the Sabbath was a terrifying symbol of a world turned upside down. It represented a community that existed outside the control of the church, the state, and the patriarchal family structure. The promise of extended life was the ultimate reward for this rebellion, a direct challenge to God's authority over the human lifespan. Ultimately, the legend of the witch's eternal Sabbath is far less about the actual practices of wise women or herbalists, and far more about the profound societal fears they ignited. The idea of women gaining power, knowledge, and longevity independently of men and the established religious order was a threat that had to be explained and demonized. The stories of time-bending ointments and infernal pacts were the language used to articulate that fear. They painted a picture of a parallel, female-dominated society that had discovered its own terrifying source of immortality, not through prayer and purity, but through a conscious, willful, and thrilling embrace of the forbidden. In the Witch's Sabbath, we find a dark, twisted mirror to humanity's quest for eternity, one where the price for a longer life was not a spiritual trial, but the very soul itself. While the 8 Immortals offer a captivating glimpse into the pursuit of eternal life, they are merely the most famous faces in a vast and intricate tapestry of Chinese lore. The Taoist tradition developed an entire cosmology of immortality, populated by a diverse hierarchy of beings known as Zion. This term is often translated as immortal or transcendent, but it means far more than simply living forever. A Zion is one who has achieved a state of perfection and harmony, having refined their essence through spiritual discipline to ascend beyond the mundane world and its mortal constraints. They are the ultimate embodiment of the Tao, the fundamental force of the universe, and their existence represents the pinnacle of human potential. This path to transcendence was not a single road but a spectrum of attainment, resulting in different ranks and types of immortals. At the highest level are the celestial immortals or Tian Zion. These beings have completed their spiritual refinement and ascended to reside in the heavens, dwelling in magnificent celestial courts and palaces. They serve in a divine bureaucracy that mirrors the imperial court of ancient China, with roles and responsibilities overseeing the cosmos. Their immortality is one of pure spirit and radiant energy. They have often shed their physical forms entirely or refined them into a body of light, becoming eternal administrators of cosmic order far removed from the earthly realm. In beautiful contrast are the earthbound immortals or Zion. These beings have achieved immortality but have chosen to remain on Earth, often residing in remote, sacred spaces far from human civilization. They make their homes in mist-shrouded mountains deep within hidden cavern systems or on mysterious islands veiled from ordinary sight. Unlike their celestial counterparts, they often retain a physical form, though it is a perfected vessel immune to decay and capable of miraculous feats. They are the recluses and sages of the immortal world, spending their endless days in meditation, studying ancient texts, brewing celestial elixirs, or simply enjoying the serene beauty of the natural world they have become one with. They represent the ideal of living in harmonious seclusion, aligned with the rhythms of the earth itself. The methods for achieving this exalted state were as varied as the immortals themselves. Some, like the alchemists we discussed earlier, sought the external solution, the Wai-Dan or external elixir. They toiled in their laboratories, refining cinnabar, gold, and rare minerals in complex furnaces, believing that consuming the perfect pill could transmute their physical body into an incorruptible form. Others pursued the Ni-Dan or internal alchemy. This was a deeply spiritual and physiological process where the practitioner used their own body as the laboratory. Through controlled breathing, precise meditation, and the circulation of internal energies known as Kai, they sought to fuse the 3 essential treasures within themselves, the Jing essence, Kai vital energy, and Shen spirit, into a sacred immortal embryo that would eventually allow them to ascend. These exalted beings did not just float in the void, they inhabited specific, legendary paradise realms that became the stuff of dreams for emperors and commoners alike. The most famous of these is Pinglai Mountain, the mythic island paradise located far out in the Eastern Sea. Described in ancient texts as being made of pure gold and jade, with palaces of platinum and trees that grew pearls and gems as fruit, Pinglai was the ultimate destination for seekers of the elixir of life. It was said to be inhabited by countless Zion who enjoyed eternal youth, sustained by the magical fungi and peaches of immortality that grew there in abundance. Its misty shores were perpetually elusive, vanishing whenever a mortal ship drew near, symbolizing that immortality could not be reached by mere physical journey, but only through spiritual readiness and virtue. Other realms included the Grotto Heavens or Dongshan, which were not distant islands but hidden spiritual universes concealed within the mountains of China itself. These were 36 major and 72 minor sacred sites where the veil between the earthly and the divine was whisper-thin. A traveler might stumble upon the entrance to a grotto heaven, often a cave or a waterfall, and step through into a paradise of stunning beauty where time flowed differently and Zion resided in tranquil solitude. This complex hierarchy of beings and their realms created a richly layered vision of the afterlife. It wasn't a simple heaven or hell, but a vast spiritual ecosystem offering countless paths and destinations for those dedicated enough to refine their spirit and join the eternal dance of the Tao, forever balancing between the celestial courts and the sacred mountains of an ageless earth. Few figures in history have achieved a form of immortality as complete and as twisted as Vlad III of Wallachia, a 15th century prince whose brutal reign became the raw, historical clay from which the most iconic vampire of all time would be sculpted. To understand how a medieval warlord became an undead legend, we must first disentangle the man from the monster, separating the documented facts of his life from the grotesque folklore that began to envelop him even before his body grew cold. His story is a powerful testament to how extreme violence, when filtered through the lens of superstition and artistic genius, can birth a myth that truly lives forever. Vlad's claim to the throne of Wallachia, a region in modern-day Romania, was perpetually unstable, caught in the crushing vice between the expanding Ottoman Empire to the east and the Kingdom of Hungary to the west. His father, Vlad Dracul, was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order dedicated to defeating the Ottomans. This is where the name originates. Dracul means dragon, but in common parlance it also came to mean devil. Thus, Vlad the Son became Dracula, son of the dragon or son of the devil. A more ominous title is hard to imagine. His life was a series of brutal power struggles. He was held hostage by the Ottomans as a young boy, an experience that likely forged his ruthless worldview, and he fought his entire life to secure his throne against foreign invaders and scheming local nobles known as boyars. His methods for maintaining control are what etched his name into history with a bloody pen. He earned the posthumous surname Tepesh, meaning the Impaler, for his preferred form of execution. Victims would be mounted on large, sharpened stakes that were then erected vertically. It was a horrifically slow and public death, designed to terrorize his enemies and subjugate his people. Historical records, including pamphlets printed by his enemies in Germany and Russia, describe him feasting amongst a forest of impaled victims, dipping his bread in their blood. While these accounts were propaganda designed to paint him as a monstrous tyrant, there is no doubt his reign was one of calculated, spectacular cruelty. He used impalement as a psychological weapon against invading Ottoman armies. The sight of thousands of their captured comrades lining the roads into Wallachia was often enough to make the formidable Turkish forces turn back. This reputation for almost supernatural brutality was the first seed of his immortal legend. To a superstitious peasantry, such extreme and terrifying power seemed to defy human limits. How could a man be so merciless, so seemingly invincible against massive empires, without possessing some otherworldly strength? The mysterious circumstances of his death in 1476 only poured fuel on this speculative fire. Historical sources are unclear. Some say he was killed in battle against the Ottomans, surrounded by his loyal bodyguards. Another popular account claims he was mistakenly killed by his own men in the chaos of combat. To prove his death, the Ottomans supposedly decapitated his body and sent his head to Constantinople, where it was displayed on a spike. The absence of a clear, dignified death and the grisly treatment of his remains created a vacuum, a mystery that folklore rushed to fill. If there was no clear death, could he have truly died at all? Stories began to circulate that Vlad Dracula had somehow escaped his fate, that he would return in Wallachia's darkest hour, a theme that seamlessly merged with existing Slavic beliefs in revenants and the undead. This fertile ground of historical horror and whispered legend is what the Irish author Bram Stoker discovered in the late 19th century. Stoker was not a historian, he was a writer of sensational fiction, and he was conducting research for a NEW Chinese letter novel. He stumbled upon accounts of this bloody Wallachian voivode named Dracula and found the perfect historical anchor for his supernatural villain. Stoker synthesized this historical figure with a rich tapestry of pre-existing Eastern European vampire myths. From Slavic folklore, he took the concept of the vampire as a bloated, predatory corpse that rose from the grave to plague its living family. From the Balkans, he incorporated the idea of complicated rituals to prevent a body from becoming undead, like placing a rose wreath or coins in the coffin. But Stoker's true genius was in what he added and transformed. He took the peasant revenant and made it an aristocratic count, a seductive and sophisticated nobleman who could move through high society in enlightened London, a symbol of ancient, corrupting evil invading the modern world. He gave the vampire a range of new powers and weaknesses, from shape-shifting and controlling the weather to the famous aversion to crucifixes and sunlight. Most importantly, he permanently fused this new creature with the name and the faint historical outline of Vlad the Impaler. Stoker's Count Dracula is not a mindless monster. He is a conscious, intelligent being who boasts of his lineage and his battles against the Turk, directly linking the fictional vampire to the historical prince. In this masterful act of literary alchemy, Bram Stoker granted Vlad Dracula a form of immortality the real prince could never have imagined. The historical man's actions created a reputation so dark it seemed to defy death. Stoker's imagination then took that reputation and forged it into a new, eternal life in the realm of myth. The real Vlad Tepes was a brutal, complex ruler in a brutal time, a man who used terror as a political tool. The immortal Dracula is his shadow, stretched across centuries by fear and fiction, a symbol that continues to shape our deepest fears of the predator that lives forever, the ancient evil that lurks just beyond the light, and the unsettling idea that some histories are too violent to ever truly rest in peace. Yet another profound and utterly unique vision of immortality emerges not from a quest or a potion, but from the very land itself. We now journey to the ancient continent of Australia, to the cosmologies of its first peoples, where the concept of eternal existence is woven into the fabric of reality. This is the dream time, known in many Aboriginal languages as the Jukurpa or Altjaringa. It is not a distant heaven or a mythical past, but a living, eternal dimension that exists parallel to our waking world, a sacred continuum where the ancestral beings who formed the earth continue to exist in a timeless state, and where every rock, river, and creature is a testament to their everlasting presence. The Dreamtime refers to that foundational epoch when formless Earth was shaped by the journeys and actions of the ancestral beings. These were not gods in a remote, celestial sense. They were often giant, archetypal creatures. The rainbow serpent, the kangaroo man, the emu woman who emerged from the earth and sky. As they moved across the barren landscape, their actions created the world as we know it. Where they dug for water, rivers flowed. Where they fought, mountains rose. Where they rested, hills formed. And when their creative work was done, they did not simply die or depart. They transformed. Some sank back into the earth, becoming rock formations or waterholes. Others became part of the sky, becoming stars or celestial patterns. Their physical bodies changed, but their essential life force and consciousness remained, eternally present within the very features they created. This means that Uluru is not just a rock, it is the physical manifestation of an ancestral being, alive with spiritual presence. A particular stand of trees might be the eternal body of a creator ancestor, brimming with the same creative power that shaped the world. This creates a concept of immortality that is deeply topographic. The land is a vast, open-air library and a living cathedral. Every hill, every canyon, every water source is a chapter in the eternal story of creation, and that story is not frozen in the past, it is continuously happening. The Dreamtime is both the beginning of all things and a perpetual, ongoing reality. Time, in the Western linear sense, does not apply here. The past, present, and future are interconnected in a single, everlasting now. The ancestors are not gone, they are dreaming the world into existence continuously, and their power is immediately accessible. The role of humanity, then, is not to seek immortality for themselves as individuals, but to become custodians of this eternal relationship. This is achieved through ritual, ceremony, song, and art. The intricate dot paintings are not mere decorations. They are maps of the dreaming, sacred designs that depict the journeys of the ancestors and the location of their spiritual essence. To paint them is to acknowledge and honor that eternal presence. Song lines or dreaming tracks are another crucial element. These are intricate sequences of song that describe the paths the ancestors took across the country. By singing these songs while walking the land, Aboriginal people literally navigate vast distances, but more importantly, they actively reanimate the dreaming, stirring the eternal power of the ancestors and reaffirming the sacred connection between the people and the land. The ceremony becomes a conduit, a way for the community to step into the Dreamtime and participate in the eternal act of creation. In this worldview, personal immortality is a secondary concern to maintaining the immortality of the world itself. An individual's spirit is believed to originate from a specific site within the dreaming, and upon death, it will return to that site to await rebirth. The ultimate goal is to live a life in harmony with the law, the intricate system of rules and responsibilities laid down by the ancestors. By doing so, by performing the correct ceremonies and caring for the sacred sites, the individual ensures the continuity of the dreaming for future generations. Their legacy is not a personal afterlife of reward, but their contribution to the unbroken cycle that keeps the world alive. It is a collective, ecological immortality, where the eternal survival of the land and its sacred stories is the highest form of eternal life. The Dreamtime presents a vision where eternity is not an escape from the world, but a deeper, more responsible way of living within it, forever connected to the timeless pulse of the ancestors who dream it all into being. But if the quest for immortality through alchemy often ended in the tragic failure of kings and the ambiguous tales of wizards, one name stands out as the ultimate success story, a legend so potent it has captivated seekers for centuries. This is the tale of Nicolas Flamel, a humble French scribe and bookseller who, according to lore, achieved what so many had failed to do. He discovered the secret of the Philosopher's Stone, created the elixir of life, and achieved immortality alongside his beloved wife. The story of Flamel is the perfect alchemical fusion of sparse historical fact and magnificent, enduring myth, representing the dream of alchemy fulfilled not by a mighty emperor but by an ordinary man. The factual foundation of Flamel's life is well documented but decidedly unmagical. He was a real person living in Paris in the late 14th and early 15th centuries. He worked as a scribe, a publisher, and a landlord, and by all accounts was a prosperous and charitable member of his community. He and his wife, Perenelle, used their wealth to endow hospitals, build shelters for the poor, and commission religious artwork. Upon his death in 1418, a tombstone was erected and his will was executed, detailing the distribution of his estate. For over 2 centuries, this was the extent of his legacy, a successful, pious, but thoroughly mortal businessman. The transformation of this historical figure into an immortal alchemist began in the 17th century, fueled by a book published in 1612 titled Livre des Figures Hiéroglyphiques, or the Book of Hieroglyphic Figures. The text was attributed to Flamel himself and claimed to tell the story of his miraculous discovery. According to this account, a mysterious, illuminated book filled with strange symbols came into Flamel's possession. For 21 years, he struggled to decipher its arcane secrets. Desperate for help, he undertook a pilgrimage to Spain to consult with Jewish scholars learned in the Kabbalah. On his return journey, he met a mysterious master who revealed the book's secrets to him. Back in Paris on January 17, 1382, following the instructions precisely, Flamel and Perronel successfully performed the great work, transmuting half a pound of mercury into pure silver. Later, they achieved the ultimate triumph, the creation of the philosopher's stone itself, allowing them to produce gold and, most importantly, to distill the elixir of life. This legendary account provided a tantalizing explanation for Flamel's documented philanthropy. His sudden wealth was not from his scribble work, it was the product of successful transmutation. But the legend did not stop with their deaths. The most captivating part of the Flamel story is the alleged posthumous sightings. For centuries after their recorded deaths, travelers across Europe claimed to have encountered the seemingly ageless couple. In the mid-17th century, a French scholar reported meeting a man in Turkey who claimed to be Nicolas Flamel, who had faked his death and fled Paris to avoid further attention. Throughout the 18th century, stories persisted of the Flamels attending secret alchemical gatherings, their appearance uncannily matching the portraits from their lifetime. These tales transformed the Flamels from historical figures who had achieved immortality into immortal beings who were still walking among us, eternal witnesses to the unfolding of history, having perfected the art of living beyond time. The power of the Flamel legend lies in its relatability. Unlike kings who commanded vast resources or mythical heroes born of divine parents, Flamel was an everyman. He was not a sorcerer by birth, but a scholar who succeeded through diligent study, persistence, and a little divine guidance. His partnership with his wife, Perronel, is also unique. In an era when alchemy was often a solitary, masculine pursuit, the Flamel story presents it as a collaborative venture, a shared spiritual journey between husband and wife. Their immortality was a joint achievement, a reward for their combined virtue and intellectual partnership. This made the dream of alchemy accessible. It suggested that the ultimate secret was not reserved for the elite but could be unlocked by anyone with enough dedication, a pure heart, and the right key. Ultimately, the legend of Nicolas Flamel's success serves as the ultimate alchemical metaphor. The transformation of base metal into gold was always symbolic of the transformation of the base human soul into a perfected spiritual state. Flamel's story completes this arc. He begins as a humble scribe, the metaphorical base metal. Through knowledge and perseverance, he achieves not just worldly wealth but spiritual eternity. The historical Flamel was a generous patron, leaving a legacy of charity. The legendary Flamel achieved something even greater. He became the literal embodiment of that legacy, a permanent force for good in the world. His story assures us that the alchemical quest at its heart was never just about gold. It was about the hope that human ingenuity, guided by virtue, could indeed unlock the deepest mysteries of existence, turning the leaden weight of mortality into the golden, everlasting light of life. Yet, even as we marvel at these ancient and spiritual visions of eternity, humanity's quest has taken a dramatic turn from the mystical to the technological, shifting from prayers and elixirs to freezers and algorithms. Our final legend is not etched in stone or told in epic poems, but is being written right now in the cryogenic chambers of Arizona and the server farms of Silicon Valley. This is the modern pursuit of immortality, a fascinating fusion of cutting-edge science, vast wealth, and a philosophical gamble that represents the latest chapter in our species' most enduring story. The most visually striking of these modern methods is cryonics, the practice of preserving a human body at extremely low temperatures in the hope that future scientific advances will one day allow for revival and cure. It is a literal bet against time, a wager that clinical death is not an endpoint but a reversible state of biostasis. The process begins immediately after legal death is declared. A cryonics team stabilizes the body, replacing its blood with a cryoprotectant solution, a kind of medical antifreeze designed to prevent ice crystals from forming and shredding delicate cellular structures. The body is then slowly cooled to around -196 degrees Celsius and placed in a large stainless steel tank filled with liquid nitrogen, where it will remain in a state of suspended animation, theoretically for centuries. This is not a recognized medical procedure but an act of profound hope, a leap of faith that future civilizations will possess technologies we can scarcely imagine, from advanced nanobots that can repair cellular damage to a complete understanding of consciousness itself. This endeavor has already created its own pantheon of modern legendary figures. Perhaps the most famous is baseball legend Ted Williams, whose decision to be cryopreserved after his death in 2002 sparked immense public fascination and controversy. His remains are held at the Alka Life Extension Foundation in Scottsdale, Arizona, alongside those of dozens of others who have made the same choice. These individuals are not myths from a distant past. They are recent historical figures who have consciously chosen to become legends in their own right, placing their physical forms in a state of waiting, hoping to awaken as pioneers in a future world. They are the contemporary equivalents of the kings who built pyramids filled with treasure for the afterlife. Only now their pyramids are gleaming, high-tech doors, and their treasure is the potential of their own restored consciousness. Beyond the preservation of the physical body lies an even more radical proposition: digital immortality. This concept suggests that the essence of a person, their memories, personality, and consciousness could be mapped, uploaded, and stored on a computer, creating a digital copy that could live on indefinitely. This isn't about reviving a body, it's about transcending it entirely to live in a simulated reality. Tech billionaires and futurists have invested millions into research initiatives aimed at mind uploading and artificial intelligence, driven by a philosophy often called transhumanism. The goal is to use technology to overcome the biological limitations of the human condition, including aging and death. For these modern alchemists, the ultimate philosopher's stone is not a rock but an algorithm. The final elixir is not a potion but a perfect software copy of the self. They seek to cheat death not through spiritual mastery, but through data storage and processing power, attempting to solve the problem of mortality with the same disruptive thinking they applied to software and social networks. What is truly remarkable is how these futuristic endeavors are, at their core, a direct continuation of humanity's most ancient obsessions. The cryonicist lying in a dew, or is the direct philosophical descendant of Qin Shi Huang sending expeditions to find the elixir of life. The tech visionary funding AI consciousness research is the heir to the medieval alchemists toiling over their flasks, seeking a way to transform base matter into an incorruptible form. The methods have changed from magic to science, the language from incantations to technical specifications, but the underlying desire is identical: the refusal to accept that our story must have an ending. We are still, as we have always been, the species that looks at the setting sun and dreams of a way to see it rise again forever. These modern legends remind us that our quest for eternity is not a relic of a superstitious past, but a fundamental part of who we are, constantly evolving and adapting, forever pushing against the finality of